161. Zombie Tamer. As if performing a magic trick, Vic produced something else from behind his back. It was a whole, fresh brain, still glistening with condensation from being chilled, giving off a strange pinkish-white sheen in the dim light. "Here, want it?" Vic wore his trademark smile, equal parts temptation and threat. Like teasing a puppy, he dangled the brain slowly in front of the Snores monster's eyes. He'd borrowed it earlier from the school cafeteria, while the perpetually sleepy cook wasn't looking, planning to take it back tonight for a special brain hot pot. The moment the Snores monster saw the fresh organ, its cloudy, bulging eyes nearly popped from their shriveled sockets. A more urgent, viscous heh bubbled from its throat, and its rotting fingers instinctively lunged to grab. But as soon as that greedy reach met Vic's kind gaze and the short stick in his hand, which had already asserted absolute authority, it jerked back as if burned, curling itself into a corner. It could only stare fixedly at the prize, eyes full of equal parts longing and fear. Good attitude. Progress," Vic said with satisfaction, then began testing commands in the patient, coaxing tone used to train a puppy. "Sit." The Snores monster cocked its not very bright head, as if parsing the word. Then, creaking at the joints, it lowered itself awkwardly to the cold floor and sat in an ungainly posture. "Lie down." It hesitated, weighing obedience against exposing vulnerable parts. The tap-tap of Vic's stick nudged it, and slowly it slumped backwards like a pile of mud, letting out a muffled thud. "Get up," it wavered, heaved itself up, swaying, and stood with effort. Vic stroked his chin, eyes darting with mischief, and casually tossed out an even more ridiculous command. "Speak." He didn't expect a zombie to answer. At most, he hoped for another heh-heh to count as success. Instead, the smile froze on his face, his eyes widening. The Snores monster's rotting Addams apple bobbed. Its damaged vocal cords vibrated, producing a series of rasping, distorted, stumbling syllables like rusty gears grinding out speech. "How? You." It was slurred and broken, but the structure was unmistakably a greeting. Vic almost dropped his stick. He felt as if lightning had struck him. "What the hell?" He pointed at the Snores monster in disbelief, then turned to the equally stunned Pugsley, his voice raised. "What kind of zombie is this? Has it become a spirit? Or is this some perverted necromancer's failed graduation project that escaped? I've worked at the Elf Inn for years, and I've never seen a zombie say hello." "Whoa." After a moment of shock, Pugsley burst into a zealous, almost fanatical round of applause, slapping his small hands until they reddened. "Brother-in-law, you're amazing. You can even teach a zombie to talk. You're the god of beast taming." Vic felt a little dazed by Seven's unreserved adulation. Though inwardly skeptical, he snapped back into his everything's-under-control mentor persona. Clearing his throat, he summed up with fake gravitas. "Ahem, standard procedure. Don't overreact. See that, Pugsley? This is the key to taming beasts." He waved the brain enticingly at the corpse. "You have to make it understand an eternal truth." He drew out the words for effect. "Obedience brings rewards. Once you establish that reward and punishment system, if you tell it to go east, it'll never dare go west. Tell it to steal a chicken, it won't snatch a dog. This is called behaviorist conditioning. High end." He tossed his chin up proudly, basking in the inflated image this gave him in Pugsley's eyes. As for why the zombie could speak, well, maybe his excellent teaching had awakened some latent intelligence. Yes, he, Victor Black, was a born educator. Pride and smug satisfaction bubbled up in his chest like fizzing soda. With a grand gesture, he flung the fresh brain, the one he'd meant for Hot Pot, precisely into the Snores monster's arms. "Here, a reward for you. Good job, keep it up." The creature scrambled to catch it, a look of near ecstasy flaring across its bulging eyes. It gurgled in satisfaction and buried its head to enjoy the meal. The sight would have challenged a normal human's stomach, but Vic and Pugsley were not normal. Vic, the well-traveled young master of the Elf Inn, stood with hands on hips, obviously proud. Pugsley, a blue-blooded young master of two, cupped his face, eyes shining with admiration for his brother-in-law. "See?" Vic tapped his palm with the short stick and launched into a hands-on lesson, his tone that of a confident mentor. "The core of taming beasts, no, taming corpses, is to establish a clear, immediate, irresistible feedback loop. Do right, get a treat immediately. Try to bite, get the big stick immediately. Simple, crude, and it works." Pugsley nodded furiously, eyes bright with hunger for knowledge. What do we train next? Brother-in-law? Make it do a somersault? Or solve calculus? Vic laughed at his son's leap in logic and rubbed his head. Calculus, you think too highly of it, and of yourself, one bite at a time, one step at a time. He eyed the Snores monster, still fighting over the brain, and a new idea struck him. Come on, let's reinforce obedience. Snores monster, look here. He pulled out another little gadget, a shriveled finger bone belonging to some unknown creature, and spun it between his fingers. Sit! The monster stopped eating by reflex and clumsily sat again, posture as crooked as a scarecrow. Good, very good. Reward. Vic flicked the finger bone toward it. The creature grabbed it, shoved it in its mouth, and chewed with crunching sounds like it was eating some odd snack. Down! This time he added a hand motion to show lying down. The Snores monster cocked its head, confused, trying to map the new word to the action. It lowered its body tentatively, then froze mid-motion. Sk! Looks like its vocabulary bank needs an update, Vic muttered, amused. He repeated the command and motion patiently, offering tiny rewards when the movement drew closer. Pugsley helped from the side. After about 10 minutes of carrot-and-stick practice, the Snores monster finally understood down. The lie-down looked more like a collapse, but it was obedient. It worked. Brother-in-law. It learned. Pugsley's face flushed with excitement. Hey, easy peasy. Vic rubbed his nose with a satisfied smile. He watched the creature lying obediently, and a bolder idea occurred to him. Step by step he approached, eyes on its reaction, voice as gentle as he could manage. Good, don't move. Good boy. Yes, just like that. Then to Pugsley's surprise, Vic reached out and lightly patted the Snores monster's dry, rough, nearly hairless head. It felt cold, stiff, and a little prickly, but not repulsive. The creature gurgled and even leaned into the touch, rubbing its head against his palm. See? Vic withdrew his hand, triumphant as if he'd discovered a new continent. Even zombies can be communicated with. It's all about method, and of course, unparalleled personal charm. He made sure to give himself the final flourish. Pugsley nodded so vigorously his eyes practically glowed. From now on, his 7 would be his life idol and chief mentor of beast taming. 162. Taming animals? Taming husbands. Breathing the surface night air again, which carried the faint scent of grass and trees, Vic stretched his wheeled pores, a little stiff limbs, and patted Pugsley's shoulder. Pugsley was still buzzing with excitement. All right, kiddo, the Snores monster isn't going anywhere. You'll have plenty of chances to visit it again. He said it soothingly, but truthfully, he was getting a bit tired. Training zombies, after the initial novelty faded, was mostly repetitive work. Far less pleasant than going back to the dorm and slipping into a warm bed with Wednesday's cool, slightly chilly body on his left and Enid's fiery warmth on his right. Thinking about that, he was eager to return, but his sense of responsibility as Pugsley's brother-in-law made him add one more instruction. Remember what I said. If you run into trouble you can't handle at school, don't try to tough it out by yourself. Just shout, "Brother-in-law, help," and I'll come sort it out for you. He said it with full confidence, puffing out his chest and raising his eyebrows, and in Pugsley's eyes it sounded like a divine decree. Okay, brother-in-law. Pugsley nodded eagerly, his eyes overflowing with trust and admiration. In his head, Vic had become taller and more radiant than any storybook hero. They parted in the woods. Pugsley, giddy with visions of a future as a zombie tamer master, jogged back to his dorm. Vic tiptoed toward the dorm he shared with Wednesday and Enid. He pressed his ear to the door. Silence except for steady breathing. Good, they were both asleep. Vic grinned and, with movements softer than a bomb disposal tech's, turned the doorknob, slipped in, and closed the door behind him. Only a dim wall lamp glowed. On the large shared bed, Wednesday and Enid slept side by side. Wednesday lay in her usual vampire-in-a-coffin pose, hands folded over her chest, back straight. Her pale face looked unusually peaceful in sleep, a few strands of ink-black hair scattered on the pillow. Enid, by contrast, curled like a warm little animal, lying on her side and hugging a pillow, a sweet half-smile at the corner of her mouth, her deep blue eyes shut and her long lashes like little fans. Suddenly, the buzz Vic felt from the zombie training melted into a warmer, more grounded contentment. He carefully took off his jacket and shoes and, like a cautious thief, tried to crawl back into his spot at the foot of the bed without waking them. just as one foot found the edge of the mattress and he began to shift his weight forward. Go take a shower. Wednesday's voice was cold and flat as a slab of ice. Vic sheepishly recoiled from the blankets, rubbed his nose, and obediently headed for the bathroom. Apparently tonight's scent, earth, humus, and a faint whiff of zombie, had not gone unnoticed. Vic, why are you only just getting back? Enid mumbled, rubbing sleep from her eyes as she sat up, a soft yawn escaping. Was your archaeology successful? Successful? It couldn't have been more successful, Vic said, already peeling off his mud-stained jacket, glowing with excitement. Wait, I'll tell you all about it after my shower. You won't believe what we dug up. 10 minutes later, fresh from the shower, hair still damp, in soft pajamas, Vic eagerly clambered onto the big bed and squeezed in between them. Tonight was so thrilling. He sat cross-legged, face lit by the dim lamp, and launched into his retelling, finding the skeleton tree, discovering that unusual zombie, and his brilliant carrot-and-stick domestication strategy. He especially dramatized the final, earth-shattering moment when the creature spoke, recounting it like an adventure documentary. So my idiot brother is keeping a zombie that can say hello, and you helped him find a secret base and provided professional training. Wednesday's dark eyes were calm and unreadable as she summarized, a faint edge of sarcasm in her tone. Heh, you bet. Vic puffed up and threw out his chin. I'm his brother-in-law. How could I not help? Enid's eyes curved, amused and a little curious. You actually know how to train pets? You've got quite a system. Of course, Vic preened. Your boyfriend is all-powerful, okay? Not to brag, but this taming method is field-proven. They all sound like useful tricks. Carrot and stick, reward obedience, establish authority, form conditioned reflexes. That'll make them perfectly submissive. Wednesday's voice trailed off, and Vic found himself subconsciously smacking his lips. His brow creased, the pride on his face wavered and then curdled into an odd doubt. Wait, that process, that core idea, rewards, authority, conditioning, why does that feel so familiar? He'd felt rules set, rewards given, guided, and tamed not long ago. Very vividly. Enid's expression also shifted. She blinked, looked at Vic, then stole a glance at the impassive Wednesday, whose ears, unusual for her, seemed a touch flushed. The more Enid listened, the more she realized the set of pet taming tips Vic was describing was almost exactly the same as the how to make Vic more obedient tips she had secretly asked Wednesday about, and Wednesday had just taught her. The only difference was the subject, Vic versus the Snores monster. It took a few seconds for the realization to land in Vic's mind. Holy crap. Establish authority, rewards, conditioned reflexes. This was exactly what Wednesday had been doing to him the last 2 days. That surprise morning kiss, the strange feeling of being nudged and guided, this was the source. Vic's face darkened with dawning comprehension. He turned slowly to Wednesday, who had been silent the whole time. Feeling his burning, accusing stare, she turned her head away a little too fast, avoiding his eyes. In the dim light, a faint, almost imperceptible blush flickered across her pale cheeks. She pulled the blanket up a bit and adopted the posture of someone pretending to sleep. Wednesday? Vic stretched the word, the accusation plain in it. From under the blanket, Wednesday's voice came muffled, her rare embarrassment leaking through. Go to sleep. 163. Setting up a scheme. After spending so much time with Vic, Wednesday had learned one truth. Never let him claim the moral high ground, or he would push his luck and demand a reward. Sure enough, when he saw that she had no intention of engaging and had cocooned herself in a quilt to tune everything out, a sly look of "I've caught you" lit up Vic's eyes. Like a cat finding a dried fish, he moved silently and leaned over behind her. Through the thin quilt, she tensed instantly. Wednesday. He lengthened the word, his voice sticky with mock grievance and self-righteousness. Wednesday kept her eyes squeezed shut, determined to ignore him until he bored himself away. Vic, however, had no self-control. He extended an index finger and through the down, precisely poked her at the waist. Her whole body shuddered. A sharp, numbing jolt, like a tiny electric shock, spread from the spot up her spine and nearly made her jump. She bit her lower lip to choke off the sound that threatened to escape, muscles taut as she held her curled, side-lying pose so he wouldn't see any weakness. Wednesday. Seeing no reaction, Vic poked again, a little harder and with increased self-righteousness. I think it's wrong, incorrect, and a violation of the Boyfriend Protection Act for you to use animal training methods on your handsome, cute, and loyal boyfriend. He invented rights on the spot. So, he leaned his head forward until warm breath fanned over the sliver of her ear exposed outside the quilt. You should compensate me for mental distress and for emotional deception. His voice dropped, low and teasing. I don't want much. How about another surprise kiss? This time I promise not to be dazed. I'll experience it properly. Wednesday's hand, buried under the quilt, clenched. This guy never stopped pushing his luck. Humph, in your dreams. She steeled herself and forced her breathing to a long, even cadence, pretending to be deep asleep. Wednesday, Wednesday. Vic poked again, testing. Wednesday held firm like basalt, unmoving. He let out a long, resentful little whine, like a big dog that had just lost its treat. The light in his eyes dimmed, the picture of wounded sorrow. Beside them, Enid, pretending to sleep, couldn't quite contain it. A faint laugh slipped past her fingers. When Vic's mournful gaze swept toward her, she snapped her eyes shut again and exaggerated a tiny snore. Her whole posture said, I'm asleep. I know nothing. Don't come get me. Vic glanced from the ice sculpture Wednesday to the fast-asleep Enid and felt doubly abandoned. He pouted, slid down to lie flat, yanked the quilt over his head, and curled into a sulking lump under the covers. At last, quiet. Wednesday relaxed a notch. Ignoring him, she thought, worked better than arguing. Her relief lasted less than 3 minutes. Suppressed, hiccuping sobs began muffled under Vic's quilt. They were handled perfectly, not loud enough to be annoying, but audible enough to tug at anyone nearby. Wednesday's eyes shifted under closed lids. Enid's snore stopped. She cracked one eye open, blue irises flickering with worry and amusement. She leaned toward Wednesday and whispered, Hey, is he really crying? Should we comfort him? Wednesday's hand tightened at her side. She could feel the body under the quilt trembling. Was it real or an Oscar-worthy performance? That tiny, plaintive noise scraped at her nerves, and at some small place she refused to admit existed, softness. Troublemaker, she scolded him silently. 99% of her knew he was faking. But that remaining sliver, the idea that Vic, usually loud and blusterous, might be fragile, made her precision-tuned heart tick oddly. The sobs kept up, like an invisible feather repeatedly brushing her nerves. She felt the quilted mass behind her vibrate with each shuddering breath, each one a clear signal of grievance. Wednesday inhaled slowly, forcing herself back to her steady rhythm. She would not be swayed by such a ham-fisted act. But was that whimper a little nasal? Could he really be crying? For a kiss? Enid, soft-hearted to the core, had long since melted. She reached out, scooped the bundled quilt and its occupant into her arms, and murmured, It's okay, Vic. Don't cry. She patted him soothingly. Vic immediately climbed into the embrace like a cub into its mother's arms, burying his face in the hollow of her neck and rubbing his head against her. His voice, muffled and deliberately nasal, kept up the accusation. Wah! Wednesday is so mean. She did something wrong and won't compensate me. She's training me like a snoring monster. He took the chance to look up at Enid with faux fear. You haven't learned these tricks from Wednesday, have you? Enid grinned, blue eyes curving into crescents, and shook her head energetically. No, Wednesday wanted me to learn, but I didn't even agree. There was even a proud lift to her voice, as if to say, See, I'm on your side. Wednesday, who had been turned away and trying to keep her chill, couldn't take it any longer. She whirled around, eyes flashing. Her glare at Enid said plainly, You ungrateful little wolf. Who was the one calling me teacher in the first place? Then she looked back at Vic, still tucked into Enid with shoulders twitching suspiciously. The combination of the ear-piercing fake crying, Enid's unprincipled favoritism, and the unexpected flutter she felt inside, caused by the performance, snapped something tight inside Wednesday. She drew a deep, unwilling breath and, as if surrendering to humiliation, let the words leak out through gritted teeth. Sigh. A long, exasperated sigh. Fine. You win. You scoundrel. The moment she said it, the sorrowful atmosphere popped like a balloon. Really? Vic lifted his head from Enid's shoulder instantly. Any traces of tears were gone. There hadn't even been moisture. Only his eyes were startlingly bright. The corners of his mouth split into a triumphant, almost arrogant grin. He chuckled, and beamed with smug satisfaction. Seeing his expression and the pleased smirk on Enid's face, Wednesday's heart sank. She'd fallen into their trap, set up by that pair of conspirators. Shame, irritation, helplessness, and an odd, unacknowledged warmth swelled together. She wanted to drag him back under the quilt and smother him, but words spoken were water spilled. And Addams always kept her promises, at least most of the time. Wednesday watched Vic's face clear the instant he saw her reaction, then break into a grin that shouted, "Plan succeeded," and she watched Enid's equally delighted expression. A nameless anger and a helplessness she couldn't name rose hot in her chest. She took a breath and told herself to keep calm. The Addamses never lost their composure, at least not outwardly. "Fine," she said, her voice coming out cold enough to be dredged from an ice cellar, though under the frost there was a small, exhausted surrender. "Speak. What compensation do you want?" She decided then that no matter how outrageous Vic's demand would be, she would agree first and settle things later. The Addams family were very good at collecting payment after the fact. Vic's eyes lit up. He popped off the bed like a child and sat cross-legged, rubbing his hands together as if about to open a treasure chest. "Hey, I knew Wednesday was the best," he said, laying on the flattery. "I want," he began, but his smile froze. Something invisible seemed to prick him. His pupils constricted, and he bolted upright as if struck. "Fuck!" he shouted. The curse ripped through the quiet dorm like a thrown stone. For an instant, everything froze. Wednesday's composed mask cracked. Her body gave the tiniest shudder, and her eyes snapped to Vic, cold, black, dagger-sharp. And yet, at the same time, a faint and very visible pink bled across her pale ears and cheeks. How dare he, right in front of her, ask such a blunt, vulgar thing? Had he lost all shame? Enid's mouth formed a perfect O, her blue eyes widening into an expression that might have read, "Godspeed, valiant knight." Vic, however, had an explanation. He realized from their faces what she'd misread and went from alarmed to indignant in a flash. "Hey, hey, hey!" he protested, jabbing a finger at his own nose. "Do you think your handsome, upright, good boyfriend only thinks about? Am I that kind of person?" He spun, remembered himself, and rushed the explanation out. A ghost shadow soldier in Donovan's shadow just sent an urgent message. "Donovan's under attack." I shouted because I was startled. It was an exclamation, not a request. Silence fell again, but this one was awkward. Enid was the first to recover, her eyes darting everywhere but at Vic as her cheeks burned. "Yeah, Wednesday definitely misunderstood. You can tell from her face." Wednesday had already smoothed her expression back into its usual unflinching ice. Only the lingering color at her ear tips and the faint purse of her lips betrayed any crack. She gave Enid a cold look that plainly said, "We will settle this later." "I'll go check it out," Vic said quickly. Shadows coalesced under his feet, swirling like ink into a vortex, the shortcut to the Shadow Kingdom he had since commanding the Ghost Shadow Legion. An emergency. He had to go. But he stopped a foot from the darkness as if remembering something crucial, turning to fix his gaze on Wednesday's refrozen mask. He had not forgotten her earlier agreement. He had engraved every word. "By the way," he said, the mouth of his grin curling into something sly and final, "don't forget about that compensation." He emphasized the word like a raised eyebrow, and the small silver recorder he'd produced from somewhere flashed faintly in his hand. The threat hung in the air. "Don't back out." Wednesday met his look without expression, dark eyes bottomless. Forget? As if. She already had several options lined up for an elegant case of amnesia. Over time, details blurred. Who would prove what happened tonight? Victor Black. What could he do? The Addamses navigated gray areas perfectly. She was still rehearsing how she'd refuse later when the small silver device suddenly spoke in her own voice. Her voice recorded and played back, clear as a bell. "Stop crying. I'll agree to whatever you want, all right?" The frost shattered. Wednesday's body stiffened. He'd recorded her. He'd actually recorded it. A flush of mortification and fury rose hot in her chest. Vic grinned like a cat that had cornered a bird. He shook the recorder, smug, then let his eyes slide pointedly toward Enid, who was trying to shrink into the wallpaper. "Of course," he drawled. "If someone wants to back out, I don't mind changing creditors." He let the possibility hang there like a whispered threat. Enid's nice too, soft and warm. Enid, who had been sinking into herself, snapped upright as if struck. Her eyes went huge and terrified. How was she involved in this? They were on the same side. She had not expected this. As if reading her panic, Vic dropped one more bomb before vanishing into the churning shadows. His gaze flicked to the colorful notebook on Enid's bedside, left open. "Oh, by the way, Enid, I think I accidentally saw your notebook," he said breezily. "Your handwriting's neat. Your insights are well written." Then he was gone, swallowed by the vortex, leaving only the faint scent of shadow and two frozen girls. Enid's blood buzzed. It was over. Everything was over. She remembered how, after Wednesday gave her one-on-one tutoring before the bonfire, she'd been so excited she'd written down everything. How to effectively guide Vic, boundary-setting techniques, reward mechanisms, plus her own notes. When Vic had come back and interrupted them, she'd been frantic and had conveniently forgotten to close the notebook. He'd seen it. It had been lying open, right there on the bedside. She wanted to crawl into a hole and die. Would Vic think she was calculating and manipulative? Would Wednesday think she was too stupid to keep a small secret? Panic and shame battered her. She had to fix this. She needed Wednesday on her side. Enid turned to Wednesday with watery, huge blue eyes and reached out, tugging gently at one of Wednesday's icy fingers. Her voice trembled into a sob, urgent and pleading. "Wednesday, you'll agree to his compensation, won't you? You'll do it?" "As long as you agree, Wednesday, and Vic's satisfied, he won't come after me," she whispered, voice getting smaller. "I can smooth over the notebook thing. Please, Wednesday, save me." At that moment, Enid had only one thought. Better you than me. The moment the black shadow moved, the last dizziness from the spatial shift hadn't even faded before a rank, gamey smell of poultry and the chaotic thrum of beating wings slammed into him. Vic had only just reformed from the flickering darkness beneath Donovan's feet. His vision was still fuzzy, but his ears were already ringing with a brutal, rasping chorus of caws. He blinked clear, and his chest tightened. The small, already cramped room had become a frantic nest. Dozens, maybe hundreds of pitch-black crows battered the cramped space like a storm. Their crimson eyes burned with a wild, unnatural light as they lunged at Donovan, who was backed against the wall. Feathers fell like black snow, beaks and claws flashed coldly in the dim light. Mr. Donovan was a mess, hands over his head and face, but he was still alive, because several loyal shadow ninjas had stepped in as a living shield, holding him in the center. They flicked their ninjato like ghosts. The blades made a deadly lattice of light, constantly cutting down crows that dissolved into black smoke with shrill cries. But the birds kept coming, relentless as a rising tide. Vic watched one ninja finally exhaust himself in the attrition. The man was shredded by the crow swarm and turned to green smoke, returning to the Shadow Kingdom to await rebirth. "Too many ants can kill an elephant," Vic murmured, frowning. A cold, slimy sensation crept up his spine like a snake. He spun toward the only dusty window. Perched on its frame, composed and still, sat a single crow, different from the frenzy inside. It was slightly larger, feathers a deeper matte black that seemed to drink in the light. Most strikingly, it had only one eye. The other was pale and ringed with scar tissue. That single pale eye fixed on Vic with a cold, almost human curiosity. Vic's mind leapt back, the flash of a crow outside the Weather Vane Cafe a few days ago. The memory tightened. Was this the same one? Vic? Venom's signature rasp cut out from Vic's shoulder as a massive black head suddenly materialized, its white eyes locking onto the one-eyed bird. "Remember last semester? On the way to this ghost town, those 3 crows that followed us. Seems this one was one of them." There was offended realization in Venom's voice. "I thought you, my idiot host, had done something to offend the heavens and deserved to be followed by crows. Turns out, it wasn't a coincidence. This feathered freak has got its eye on you. What a stalker." Vic's gaze narrowed. He felt the heat of Dragon Blast energy smolder at his palm, a hot red glow gathering, ready to clear the crowded room. But looking at the battered little house and the shaken Donovan, he forced the urge down. One blast would wipe the crows, but it would also level Donovan's last refuge. He clenched his jaw. What a pain. Vic nudged the protruding head of Venom with his shoulder. "Show off time. I'll leave these noisy feathered beasts to you." "Heh, now that's more like it," Venom crowed, delighted. "You should have let me out earlier. Those broken 9 are just for show. They aren't as convenient or useful as your original partner. Using them every day. I'm almost out of a job, brother. Grumbling about neglect, the symbiote surged from Vic's neck and shoulders in a living asphalt black rush. It spread over him, then threw out a dozen thick tentacles tipped with claws and blunt hammers. Party time, Venom roared, taking control of Vic's body and charging into the crow swarm like a tiger into a flock. The tentacles lashed like whips, bowling birds through the air. Some opened maw-like tips to swallow and crush crows whole. Others slammed down like sledgehammers, pulverizing birds and floorboards together. The style was brutal and efficient, a violent grace that carved a vacuum in the room's center. When the last crow fell, a black tentacle, still unsatisfied, curling around a twitching leg, shoved it into a cavernous mouth and chewed with a sickening crunch. The one-eyed crow on the windowsill was gone. All that remained were a few matte black feathers. Slipped away quick, Venom muttered, his huge white eyes sweeping the wreckage with a hint of disappointed hunger, like a kid who hadn't had enough fun. Then, with a touch of pettiness, "Okay, trash cleared. I'm going back to brood. Don't always use those fancy 9 for no reason. Think of your original best friend now and then." Before Vic could answer, the massive black form retracted with a whoosh, folding back into him. The only traces of the fray were the smell of blood and several shattered floorboards. Vic shrugged, taking Venom's tantrum in stride. There were more immediate things to attend to. He sat on the only semi-intact, worn couch, and, with a small gesture, the remaining shadow ninjas slid back into the shadows like melting ice and vanished. The room suddenly felt emptier, leaving the burnt feather tang and a metallic scent in the air. "So, Mr. Donovan." Vic settled into a more comfortable position and looked at the shaken X cowering against the wall. "Now that the crows have flown and the immediate dangers cleared, it would be useful to talk. What exactly did you and your unlucky partner dig into that made someone desperate to silence you? That they'd send these feathered beasts to raid your home?" Donovan wiped cold sweat from his brow, his face still pale. He glanced at Vic, then at the ruined room, struggling with worry. "Vic, listen, I'm grateful you saved me truly, but because of that, I can't let you get involved. This water runs too deep. It's more complex and dangerous than anything I've ever handled. You, Wednesday Enid, the others, it's better if you stay away." Vic rolled his eyes and replied with flat certainty. "Give me a break, Mr. Donovan. The moment I stepped into this room and fought those crows, I was already in it. Do you think whoever's behind this will believe you were just passing by? We're all in the same boat now." 166. Death Notice in a Mental Hospital. Donovan slumped, powerless, onto the floor, his calloused hands digging into his graying hair as if he could wrench the memories out of his skull. The dilapidated shack smelled of burnt feathers and old blood. The acrid tang made his hunched silhouette look even more defeated. After a long silence, a heavy sigh escaped him, squeezed out from between his fingers. "It's Lucian Mental Hospital." His voice was as rough as sandpaper. "Carl Bradbury, my stubborn old friend. He found it by accident when he was sorting through some old files." Vic leaned against the arm of the only intact, tattered sofa, frowning at the name. "Lucian, that place up on the mountain outside town, the one that takes care of special people like us?" There was a faint sarcasm in his tone. Which Nevermore student hadn't heard of it? A place that called itself a treatment center, but felt more like a high-security prison. Exactly. Donovan let his hands fall away from his face, revealing an exhausted face. His eyes stared blankly at the mess of crow corpses and scattered black feathers on the floor. Tyler's mother, when things were at their worst back then, she stayed there for a while too. At the name of his late wife, a tiny spark flickered in Donovan's clouded eyes, a brief, fragile light, then was swallowed by the deeper dark of grief and guilt. It died quickly, leaving only a dull, heavy silence. Until she died there. Not long after she went in, the obituary came. Sudden accident during treatment. Died after failed resuscitation. Just that one line. The last words almost choked him. He exhaled again, the breath light but loaded, as if 1,000 pounds had landed on the air. Vic stayed quiet, not pushing. He could feel that the sharp, capable man Donovan had once been was teetering on the edge of something he couldn't bear to look at. He drew in a slow breath. steadying himself against the bitterness rising in his chest. Carl found that Lucian's obituaries show that the mortality rate for rare outcasts is absurdly high, nearly 80%. It doesn't make any sense. Even more, once they issued an obituary, they cremated the remains with frightening speed, rushing to dispose of them before families could even collect the ashes. It didn't feel like they were arranging funerals. It felt like they were hurrying to cover something up. Donovan licked dry lips. His voice trembled just enough that Vic heard it. He sounded afraid of what he was about to say. So, I can't help but wonder, Tyler's mother, could she be alive? Vic finished for him, calm but sharp. Donovan snapped his head up. His eyes were filled with a mix of hope and dread as he nodded. Yes, that's what Carl thought too. He felt something shady was going on in Lucian, maybe human experimentation or something worse. Before he died, in the last call he made to me, his breathing was unstable, like he was hurt. He only got a few words out between gasps. Lucian, Data, and Lois. He stared at Vic, bloodshot and intense. Lois. That was the last thing he said to me. I don't know what it means. A name? A code? A place? An acronym? Carl must have been silenced because he found something. Those crows, they probably know Carl left me clues. They'll come for me next. Vic was quiet for a moment, his fingers tapping the rotting velvet of the sofa. The room was a mess, and his gaze kept returning to Donovan's anxious, hopeful face. Lois, he murmured, thinking. Then he met Donovan's eyes. Mr. Donovan, leave the investigation to me. I'll have my people protect you. For now, you need to get out of here. Lay low in Transylvania. There's an elf in there that's very safe, and your son Tyler is there as well. No, that won't do, Donovan protested, shaking his head. Worry and resistance hardened his features. This is too dangerous for you. Principal Larissa was right. This isn't something for you kids to be involved in. Vic's playful expression vanished. What replaced it was a near-cold calm. Dangerous? And what exactly will you do if you stay? Be a snack for the crows waiting outside? The words landed like a blow. Donovan's face went pale and his lips trembled. He had no answer. A disgraced former headmaster who could barely protect himself would indeed be a liability. He started to argue, but his voice faltered. But. No more buts, Mr. Donovan. Vic cut him off, his tone softening but carrying an unyielding authority. You wouldn't want Tyler to lose his father before he's had his fill of being lovey-dovey with his Miss Siren, would you? It sounded almost like concern, and Donovan's resistance crumbled. Vic didn't waste any more words. He made the decision and the command. Shadows shifted at the edge of the room, and two silent, shadowy figures, ghost shadow ninjas, emerged, moving to flank Donovan as if to escort him out. Vic, wait! You can't, Donovan began. The ninjas were efficient and polite in their way. They guided him out of the rickety shack before he could finish. Donovan's figure soon faded into the night, likely taking the shadow paths straight to the airport. The shack sank back into silence, with only the scattered crow corpses, the black feathers, and the lingering smell of burnt blood left behind. Vic didn't leave right away. He walked to the window and pulled back a corner of the torn curtain, looking out into the deep night. Far off, the Gothic spires of Nefermore Academy rose like a crouching beast under the thin moonlight. Lucian Mental Hospital. Outcasts. Experiment. He repeated the words under his breath, feeling them scratch at a place in his memory he had tried to seal shut. They brought up a blurred, painful childhood full of disinfectant and cold metal, the sensation of being restrained and observed like a specimen. Even now, after he'd once fought back, his heart lurched cold at the reminder. Could it be them? 167. Night Raid. I want to know everything about Lucian Mental Hospital. Vic's voice was unusually cold and hard in the empty cabin. Investigate it. Search every inch. Don't let even a mouse hole go unchecked. The shadow behind him seemed to swell, writhing like something alive. Countless pinpricks of crimson flared in the dark, the hungry eyes of the Ghost Shadow Legion answering without a sound. Then the anomalies retracted, and the darkness fell again as if nothing had happened. Vic turned and stepped into the not-yet-settled shadow, his figure swallowed instantly. A moment later, in the Nefermore Academy dormitory, the air shimmered slightly as Vic emerged from the shadow behind the door. The cold, serious expression from the Lucian case was gone. His face was back to that mischievous, brilliant smile he wore before leaving. Wednesday, Enid. His voice softened into a gooey drawl, like toffee about to melt. The debt collector is back. I'm here to collect. The room was quiet except for the faint chirp of insects outside the window. Under the dim wall lamp, two girls lay on the large shared bed, seemingly already asleep. Wednesday lay on her back, hands folded over her chest, breathing as steady as a metronome. Her pale face looked even more serene, statue-like in sleep. Enid was curled on her side, hugging a pillow, long lashes fanned across her eyelids, a sweet curve at the corner of her mouth, and a soft, rhythmic snore escaped now and then. Vic blinked, disbelief written all over his face. No way, he muttered under his breath, sounding half accusation, half exasperation. It hasn't even been 10 minutes. At least make the fake sleeping convincing. You can't cheat like this. He crept up on the bed, leaning close to Wednesday's ear and whispering, Wednesday, Enid, your compensation hasn't been paid yet. Wednesday did not stir, not a lash twitching, as if her soul had already gone off on some Gothic dream tour. Vic refused to give up and gently shook Enid's shoulder. Enid? Cutie, don't sleep. Wake up and have some fun? Enid responded with a vague grunt like an impatient kitten, turned away with her back to him, and resumed her deep sleep. Are they really asleep? Vic studied them, searching for any telltale flaw. They were perfect. He pouted, disappointed, but quickly rallied. All right then. He feigned helplessness, but his tone held a dangerous undertone. I'll be merciful and let you defer the debt until tomorrow morning. However, he paused for effect, letting his gaze sweep over the sleeping faces of his two girlfriends with a conspiratorial threat. There will be interest for being overdue. Compound interest. By then, humph, one kiss won't be enough to settle it. He watched them closely for any micro-expression or twitch. Wednesday remained still. Enid's breathing never faltered. With a resigned sigh, Vic eased himself down between them. The day's events replayed through his mind like a revolving lantern, helping Pugsley tame the creature nicknamed the Snores Monster, aiding Donovan through the Crow Swarm's death attack, and ordering a deeper investigation into the eerie Lucian mental hospital. Even someone as energetic as he felt the weight of exhaustion. As his body relaxed, heavy eyelids claimed him. Before long, soft, even snores escaped from Vic and rippled through the quiet dorm. After confirming that Vic was asleep, the supposedly sleeping Wednesday slowly opened her eyes. Her black eyes were crystal clear in the dimness. There was no sign of sleep in them. She tilted her head and glanced at the deeply breathing Vic with a complicated look. Enid, on the other side, also turned over silently. Her blue eyes glinted in the dark. She mouthed, without sound, You scared me. I almost couldn't hold back. Silently, the two of them rose and crept toward Vic like cats under moonlight. Wednesday's hand reached slowly for Vic's chest. Her fingertips looked exceptionally pale in the dim light. The objective was obvious. Find the evidence, destroy it, and then deny everything. What debt? Wednesday, Enid whispered, breathy and hesitant, guilt flickering across her face. Is this really a good idea? Wednesday glanced up at her, expressionless. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but perfectly clear. It is indeed not a good idea. Fine, then I won't acknowledge the debt later. I'll let Vic come to you to collect. Don't. Enid instantly capitulated, shaking her head like a rattle. Search quickly. Wednesday's fingertips probed Vic's shirt pocket. Beneath the fabric, she felt warmth and a steady heartbeat, but the pocket was empty. Strange. I remember him putting it here. Her brow creased. Enid, did you find it? When Wednesday looked up, her face darkened. She saw Enid's hand trailing along the firm outline of Vic's abdomen beneath his pajama hem, eyes bright with lingering curiosity, as if she wanted to slip her hand inside. Caught under Wednesday's cold gaze, Enid jerked her hand back as though burned. Her cheeks flushed and her eyes darted around. There's nothing here either. Both were focused on their search, unaware that Vic's snores had stopped. Two glittering eyes opened in the dark, gleaming with mischief as they watched the nighttime raid without blinking. Enid's attention turned to Vic's pants pocket, where his hand lay casually resting and blocking the opening. She held her breath and extended two fingers to move the obstructing hand aside. When her skin touched Vic's wrist, his hand lifted on its own as if obligingly making way. Thanks, Enid whispered, and then froze as realization hit. Wednesday, too, sensed something amiss and tried to withdraw her hand, but it was too late. "Hey, caught two little mice who aren't sleeping properly," Vic's voice rang out, laughter bright. His arms snapped around them like iron bands, pulling both girls into a warm, firm embrace and pressing them to his chest. "Eek! Ah!" came the short cries as Wednesday and Enid were hauled in, trapped and unable to move. "You little things, pretending to sleep with me?" Vic lowered his head and rubbed his chin against Wednesday's hair, then turned to grin at the blushing Enid. "Those were tricks I played as a kid." "Hmm?" "Enid, you were stroking rather enthusiastically just now. How are my abs? Give me a review." His voice was hoarse with sleep and heavy with teasing. Warm breath at her ear sent Enid into a fluster. She buried her burning face into the crook of Vic's shoulder and mumbled an unconvincing denial. Wednesday, though equally trapped, maintained a colder exterior, even if a slight flush at her earlobes betrayed she wasn't entirely unmoved. "Victor Black, let go," Wednesday said. "Let go? Not a chance." Vic tightened his hold and sounded perfectly reasonable. "The debt hasn't been collected, and you tried to destroy evidence. That's an extra offense." He nodded toward his searched chest and pajama hem with feline pride. "Now that I've caught you red-handed, my two Miss Thieves, shouldn't we have a nice talk about compensation and interest?" He waited, his gaze flicking between Wednesday's forced calm and Enid's embarrassed profile, ready for whatever came next. The night deepened. In the dormitory, between the debt collector and the accomplices who had failed to deny, the contest, unequal on the surface, was just entering a far more interesting stage. 168, Wolf Kiss Attack. Vic's arms were warm chains, holding Wednesday and Enid firmly at his sides. In the dark, the steady vibration from his chest carried a muffled chuckle, like a bear that had stolen honey. "So," he drawled, his gaze dropping first to Enid's flushed face as his fingertips pinched her soft waist and made her tremble. "Does this misaccomplice who tried to destroy the evidence have anything to plead?" At his touch, Enid felt as if someone had struck a pressure point. She went limp and answered in a sticky, sweet voice, "I was wrong. Vic, you're the best. Can the interest be a little cheaper?" "Oh?" Vic raised an eyebrow and leaned in, his nose almost brushing hers. "That depends on your performance." Before she could respond, he lowered his head and planted a loud, gentle kiss on her smooth forehead. "This is the base interest." Enid's eyes flew wide, and the blush spread down her neck. She clutched the spot he'd kissed, as if it were on fire, her heart bubbling with sweetness. "Ag! A sneak attack! That doesn't count! It doesn't count!" "Protest overruled," Vic laughed, then turned his attention to the ever-silent Wednesday with an even greater challenge in his tone. "Well then, Miss Wednesday, principal offender, attempting to destroy core evidence is an even greater crime. You wouldn't be planning to renege on your debt, would you?" Wednesday inhaled slowly, lifted her lashes, and met Vic's teasing look with her ink-black eyes. She knew there was no escaping. "One," she said, cold and definite. "You get only one kiss." Vic's eyes sparkled, but he pretended to be reluctant. "Just one? Isn't that a little low as interest, given the misdeed?" "One," Wednesday repeated, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. Her look made it clear. "Say another word and you'll be sleeping on the floor." "Fine. One it is," Vic conceded, but added a condition immediately. "Location and method are decided by me." Wednesday narrowed her eyes and tacitly agreed. Vic released Enid and cupped Wednesday's cheeks with both hands. Her skin was cool and smooth, like fine porcelain. She did not flinch. She was still as a deep pool. Vic leaned in slowly, then veered at the last second to press a feather-light kiss to her forehead. Wednesday froze. Her lashes trembled. The faint warmth lingered and something inside her softened. Vic sat back, grinning and flashing his small, sharp canines. Location, forehead. Method, a pure goodnight kiss. Principal offender's interest collected. The tiny stir of feeling in Wednesday immediately transformed into an impulse to kick him off the bed. She snorted and turned her face away. Hey, Lord Creditor." Enid, feeling overlooked, tugged at Vic's sleeve, her blue eyes flashing with playful indignation. "What about my interest? You're just giving me the basic version? I want a special edition, too." She pouted and pointed at her lips. Amused, Vic pulled Enid back into his arms and lifted her chin. "Fine, I'll give you a deluxe upgrade." This time he aimed at her mouth. The kiss was longer, a gentle but unmistakable press that searched and explored until Enid whimpered and melted into him, cheeks ripe with color. Vic had perfected the move. It was a one-to-one replay of the kiss he'd once given Wednesday. "This is the VIP special interest. Satisfied?" He let her go, breathing a little heavier. Enid couldn't speak. She buried her face in the crook of his neck and nodded, heart pounding. Wednesday's barely audible snort reached his ears. He turned and saw, despite her averted face, that the blush on her ears had deepened. On impulse, Vic leaned over and, with lightning speed, planted a quick peck on Wednesday's slightly pursed pale lips, like a dragonfly skimming the water. It was touch and go. Wednesday's whole body stiffened and she snapped her head back. A flush crawled across her cheeks. "Victor Black, you!" She couldn't finish. "Additional interest," Vic declared, feigning offense as he met her murderous glare. As punishment for the principal offender's attempt to disrupt the order of the financial market, specifically, the interest rules set by this creditor. Fair and square. No cheating for young or old. Fearing she might really lose it, he tightened his hold and looped his arms around both girls, laying back and closing his eyes. "Today's debt settlement is complete. Sleep." Enid giggled like a lovesick fool, thrilled by Vic's audacity and by Wednesday's fluster. Wednesday struggled for a second, but Vic held her firm. She gave a resigned snort that served as tacit acceptance of the unfair additional clause, closed her eyes, and almost imperceptibly, the corner of her mouth lifted. Silence settled in the dormitory. The three of them breathed in time, their heartbeats slowly synced. Vic kept his eyes closed, a satisfied smile on his face. The gloom of the mountain and their exhaustion had been chased off by the warmth in his arms. That extra kiss, he told himself it was all about maintaining the financial order. He definitely hadn't done it because Wednesday's ears had gone red. Victor Black was a creditor with principles. Ahem. Principles that could be applied flexibly when necessary. As the night deepened, the three slept wrapped in each other's arms. Morning light filtered through the stained glass, casting cold splashes of color across the dorm floor. Vic rubbed his eyes and sat up from the large bed, reaching habitually to both sides, and found them empty. "What the?" he grumbled, voice thick with sleep. "They didn't even wake their boyfriend. That's inconsiderate. Where's my morning kiss? Who am I supposed to ask for it?" Only his own breathing answered him. He scratched his messy black hair in annoyance, pulled on his shoes, and shuffled toward the bathroom, head down. He pushed the door open with a clack, eyes still hazy, and stepped inside, right into something furry and warm. The texture was wrong. The towels weren't this thick, and they didn't have a body temperature. He looked up and met a pair of enormous amber eyes, vertical pupils like a wild animal's. A gray wolf, its body filling nearly half the small bathroom, loomed over him. Its snout was slightly parted, flashing white, sharp teeth, hot breath steaming Vic's face. Time froze for a second. When Vic met its stare, the wolf's pupils narrowed to dangerous slits. A low growl rolled up from its throat, its hind legs tensed, muscles coiling, and its great jowls snapped open. With a gust of rank wind, it lunged, aiming for the most vulnerable spot at Vic's neck, the carotid artery. The werewolf's teeth came to a screeching halt a centimeter from Vic's throat, sharp canines so close you could feel the cold sting, but Vic didn't flinch. Not a flicker of fear crossed his face. He blinked those sleepy eyes, yawned, and said in a lazily clear voice with a hint of bargaining, "Enid, let's be reasonable. Even if you turn into a werewolf, the morning kiss is mandatory. It's a matter of principle." Enid froze. For a moment there was something almost human in her amber, beast-like eyes. Frustration and boredom. She backed away with a resentful scrape of her claws on the tile. Her attack posture softened, and her massive head drooped in disappointment, as if to say, "How boring. I didn't even scare you." Vic only laughed. Instead of retreating, he stepped forward, a grin like someone discovering a new continent spreading across his face. He opened his arms and hugged the thick, gray-furred neck, burying his face in the fur and taking a deep, luxuriant sniff. "Werewolf Enid, ah!" he sighed with obvious satisfaction. So soft, so warm, so comfortable. His hands were already stroking the dense fur as if petting a giant dog, murmuring, "This texture, it's amazing." The touch landed squarely on a ticklish spot. Enid stiffened, then a low, involuntary whimper escaped her muzzle. No threat in it anymore, only stunned submission. Vic's eyes lit up with a clever gleam. He kept massaging the neck, and with careful, practiced movements, guided the huge werewolf to lie down. Enid, dizzy with pleasure, let him. Her massive body sank onto the cold tiles, relaxed and helpless. Vic didn't stop. He let his hands slide down toward the soft, vulnerable belly. The moment his warm palms touched that furry underside, Enid convulsed, but it was pleasure, not resistance. An ecstatic, almost puppy-like howl burst from her throat. A woo! Her limbs went limp, her tongue lolled, and her amber eyes narrowed into slits of bliss. Vic knelt and worked his hands over the belly, alternating between gentle kneading and light scratches, clearly proud of his handiwork. How is it? Better than being human, right? From the doorway, Wednesday had appeared and was leaning against the bathroom frame in a black nightgown that made her skin look paler. Arms crossed, she watched the absurd scene with a faint, razor-sharp sneer. "So," she said coolly, voice like ice beads on jade, "this is the final result of your carefully planned prank? Being rubbed like a domesticated puppy and making those very distinctive sounds?" Enid's gurgling faltered. Her massive head turned toward Wednesday's black eyes, and shame and panic flooded her face. "Oh no, I've been seen!" She wanted to bolt, to hide from Vic's hands, but the belly rub was too perfect, the electric tingling too constant. Her mind screamed that it was too embarrassing, but her body screamed, "Don't stop." Her claws scraped the tile as she gave a tangled whimper that was half protest, half plea. "Wednesday." Vic looked up, eyes bright with the urge to show off his discovery. "Come and try. The fur is top-notch, super soft. You'll be hooked after one pet." Wednesday's eyebrow lifted a fraction. Her gaze slid from Vic's grin to the sheepish, slumped wolf, and the hint of amusement at her mouth grew colder. "Oh, sounds tempting." Her voice was flat, each word a precise prick. "But Enid, a friendly reminder, your full transformation. The time is almost up, isn't it?" As if doused in ice water, Enid's huge body shuddered. She'd been lost in the comfort and completely forgotten the timer. If she shifted back to human, while Vic's hands were still on her belly, she couldn't even imagine the horror. "Oh!" She let out a short howl of terror, shame, and panic. Her body exploded with force, her hind legs kicked, flinging the kneeling Vic backward. In the next instant, the gray wolf shot out of the bathroom like an arrow, leapt onto the bed, and dove under the quilt, dragging it over herself as tight as possible. Beneath the covers came ragged, muffled breaths and frantic wriggling as the massive form shrank rapidly. "Hey, Enid, my luxury wolf petting service isn't over yet," Vic called, clutching his chest and stumbling after her. From under the duvet came a muffled, thoroughly embarrassed human voice with a tremor in it. "Victor Black, if you even think about peeking, I'll bite you to death, awoo." The last awoo was more cute than threatening, giving away how exposed she felt. Vic stopped. He stared at the bulging, shifting lump under the quilt, clicked his tongue in theatrical regret, and turned to face the wall with his hands raised in surrender. "Fine, fine, I won't look." Sigh, and just like that, the fluffy benefits are gone. Having changed back into human and hurriedly dressed in her uniform, Enid emerged from the tangled blankets with cheeks so flushed they might bleed. She glared at Vic with a mix of shame and indignation, her inner voice pounding the ground. How is his technique so good? I actually let him touch my belly, without defending myself. Woo, I feel so unclean. Heh, just kidding. As if reading her mind, Vic tipped his chin up, pride and a hint of arrogance on his face. "You think I got the name Big Brother for nothing? Without some real skill, how could I keep those hundreds of rowdy wolf cubs at the Elf Inn in line?" He'd spent a lot of time trying to manage those hyperactive little wolf children. When it came to dealing with fluff and chaos, Victor Black considered himself a pro. Seeing Enid's crimson face, he grinned and, right in front of her, mimed kneading the air with his hands, eyes gleaming with mischief. That was enough to light the fuse. "Ah, Vic, you pervert! I'll kill you!" Enid yelped like a kitten whose tail had been trodden on, leaping at him with claws and teeth bared. Vic simply sidestepped, then reached out to tickle her still sensitive belly. "Yah!" Enid went limp instantly. With a surprised cry, she toppled into Vic's prepared arms. Her cheek pressed into his warm chest, and she heard a muffled, triumphant chuckle. "You can't blame me for this," Vic said, holding his soft, fragrant girlfriend. Having scored the upper hand, he feigned innocence and rubbed his chin against the top of her head. I didn't ask you to turn into a werewolf and scare me first thing in the morning. So, what happened? Enid buried her burning face in his chest, her voice small and trembling with the embarrassment of a foiled plan. Today. Today is Nevermore's prank day. I wanted to be the first to scare you, a surprise. Who knew the surprise would fail and I'd end up getting rubbed by you? Prank day? Vic's eyes lit up like a newly powered bulb, the look of someone discovering a whole new world. There was a holiday that encouraged legal mischief and settling scores? Divine. A cold voice at the doorway answered him. Wednesday had already dressed. Her black uniform made her skin look like porcelain. She leaned against the frame with her arms crossed, dark eyes calmly taking in the pair in Vic's arms. Her tone was matter-of-fact, a traditional holiday on the school calendar. In theory, from sunrise to sunset, pranks are tolerated or even encouraged, so long as they don't cause permanent physical or psychological harm and the intent isn't revealed beforehand. She paused, looking at Vic's suddenly radiant face, and a faint, pointed smile curved at the corner of her mouth. Seems you've already found your first target, Vic. Vic glanced down at Enid, who was trying to curl into herself from the embarrassment of being caught in an intimate posture by Wednesday. He looked back up at Wednesday, whose expression suggested she would simply watch the spectacle unfold, and a cocky smirk spread across his face. I've found more than just a target, he said, pulling Enid closer. I've found treasure. Prank Day was practically tailor-made for Victor Black. He decided his grand prank campaign required professional props. Prank. Prank. His hand found his chin as he scanned the room. A sudden spark hit him, and he slapped his thigh. Of course, those two jokester brothers. He remembered a chaotic, happy time at the Elf Inn a few years back, when the Weasley family had won a 2-month free stay and arrived in a riotous procession. Vic and the twins, Fred and George, had clicked instantly. They'd spent those weeks creating countless surprises that left adults tearing their hair out. After Wednesday and Enid drifted away from the doorway, Vic grinned and pulled a strange, irregularly lustrous device from his inner pocket. It wasn't a muggle phone. He and the Weasley twins had cobbled it together in the inn's warehouse, mixing alchemy, prank magic, and a few borrowed tech parts. The signal could penetrate most magical barriers and bypass many wards. He tapped a complex rune sequence. The communicator popped like bubbles and then connected. Hey, George? Wait, that laugh? Fred? Vic, you lucky dog, you still remember us, came a vibrant, amused voice. In the background, there were small crackling pops and another nearly identical laugh. Guessed right, I'm Fred. George is busy making a Niffler fall in love with our new love-at-first-sight bubblegum. Effects a bit intense so far. So what made you think of us poor souls locked up in prison? Vic teased. The twins always joked that Hogwarts was a wizarding jail. Hey, you're going to be jealous. Vic's grin widened. At our school today, prank day, official holiday, from sunrise to sunset, so long as it's not permanently harmful and you don't spoil the intent ahead of time, pranks are allowed. Forgiveness is built in. Isn't that divine? 2 seconds of stunned silence crackled through the communicator, then an eruption of jealous wails. What? Prank day? A whole holiday just for pranks? Merlin's beard. Nevermore is heavenly. This crappy Hogwarts is all exams, exams, exams. The second voice joined the outrage. Vic, you're showing off. Pay compensation for mental distress. Fine, I'll pay, Vic crowed, which is why I'm calling. I need your help, big time. I want a batch of your best prank props. Creative, dramatic, and unforgettable. He began ticking them off. 100 of your Weasley wildfire whiz-bangs, the ones that chase people and explode into crazy colors and shapes. Mini portable swamps, dozen of them, but the effect needs to last. A dozen trick wands, the new models that can turn into rubber chickens or screaming slippers. A few boxes of canary creams. He hesitated, then added, anything new for someone extremely calm and alert? And payment won't be an issue, he went on. I don't have galleons, but I have gold, gems, or some special materials from other worlds. Hard currency, I promise. The twins' breathing quickened on the other end, both from longing for prank day and from the tempting payment. Merlin's fattest underpants. Vic, you're our best customer. No problem. Leave it to us. We were just developing some big ones and needed a field testing ground. We guarantee your prank day will be unforgettable. Give us half an hour. No, 20 minutes. We'll pull everything from the warehouse and use that vanishing cabinet you sent last time to get it to you. Be ready. Deal. Vic snapped his fingers. And toss in a few boxes of nosebleed nougat and that mystery item 4. They might be useful. Hurry, my prankster soul is burning. It's our honor to serve the cause of mischief, the twins shouted together, the sound of rummaging and tiny explosions crackling in the background before the line cut off. Vic pocketed the alchemical communicator with a hunter's smile. Once the Weasley props arrived, Nevermore was in for a show. He couldn't wait to see the faces of Wednesday, Enid, and the faculty and students when Hogwarts-grade chaos hit campus. Prank Day, backed by the Weasley brothers, this was going to be one for the books. Prank Day, the full backing of the Weasley twins, this was practically Merlin handing him a stage on a silver platter. Victor Black, Vic, wanted Nevermore Academy to remember his name, not as Wednesday and Enid's boyfriend, but as the most notorious king of pranks in its history. He hummed off-key, fingertips tapping the little alchemical communicator like a conductor ready to start the overture to a masterpiece. He could already see the school turned upside down in his head, neat freaked sirens splashing through miniature swamps, elegant vampires being chased across the courtyard by rainbow fireworks, honest werewolves looking ridiculous as they gurgled through treats jammed in their mouths. Perfect. The vanishing cabinet Vic had tucked in the corner of the dorm buzzed against the wood. He hurried over and eased the door open. Where there had been nothing, now sat a mountain of colorful, oddly shaped boxes and parcels filling the cabinet to the brim, exhaling all manner of strange scents. Topping the pile was a scrap of parchment in extravagant copperplate. To our best customer and partner, Vic, happy prank day. Attached are selected products and an instruction manual, for reference only. Actual effects depend on the situation. Your faithful partners in crime, Fred and George. Vic's grin split his face as he inventoried his spoils like a child on Christmas morning. 2 big boxes labeled Weasley's Wildfire Whiz-Bangs, faces and explosion patterns doodled on the sides. Several jelly-like pouches marked Portable Swamps, miniature, giving when he squeezed them. A bundle of trick wands in cheap-colored paper. Tin after tin of canary creams, nosebleed nougat, fever-fit toffee, and a handful of extra gifts from the twins. Hiccup powder, color-changing ink bottles, auto-dancing quills. He reached into the pile and cradled a small box of golden toffees like it was a relic. His eyes lit up. The twins were looking out for him. He tucked the toffees into his pocket with reverence and snapped his fingers, the familiar glint of calculation in his eyes. First things first, he murmured. The whole school needs an enthusiastic morning greeting. He scattered the portable swamps like a farmer sowing seeds. Girls, bathroom entrance, the stairwell landing, and most importantly, the cafeteria doorway. The little jelly packs hit the floor and, with a soft, eager slurp, puffed into sticky, bubbling miniature quagmires that smelled faintly of silt and rotting grass. The first student who sprinted for breakfast, a werewolf, stepped straight into one up to his knee and let out a half-panicked, half-vulgar howl. Vic didn't stop there. He vaulted onto the windowsill with the theatricality of a conductor and lobbed a handful of whiz-bang tubes into the courtyard. The fireworks whistled to life, homing in on a group of vampiric students sauntering nearby, chasing and exploding into grinning smiley faces that left the vampires sputtering and indignant. Chaos spread like ripples from a pebble. Nevermore became a stew of shrieks, laughter, barks, and the sharp crack of pyrotechnics. Vic watched his little symphony with pride, until his eyes found the one audience member that mattered most. Wednesday stood beneath a withered tree at the edge of the courtyard, head down over a thick, ancient book. Where the noise swelled, she seemed wrapped in an invisible field of silence. The din fell away a few feet around her. She didn't so much ignore the chaos as look through it with contempt. For a prankster, that kind of unruffled calm was irresistible. The ultimate challenge. Vic melted into the milling crowd and slipped between stone pillars, inching closer. He fished the box of golden toffees from his pocket and picked the shiniest piece, its color almost unbearably inviting. Timing would be everything. At the exact instant Wednesday turned a page and her fingertip hovered to flip the next. Wednesday, Vic called, bright and breezy, with a grin plastered on. He presented the toffee like a magician offering his final trick. Try this. It's supposed to make people feel better. She paused, the motion of the page suspended. Slowly, she lifted her lashes and glanced at him, at his smile, which screamed, "Please praise my thoughtfulness," and then down at the candy. Her expression didn't change. No surprise, no curiosity. She inspected it as if it were a specimen and entirely irrelevant to her. For a heartbeat, everything went quiet. The courtyard noise melted into a soft background hum. Vic, about to switch to plan B and shove the candy into her hands, felt his triumphant grin tear wider as Wednesday, without a flicker of interest, set the book aside. Her fingers, pale and efficient, pinched the toffee. Her movements were so precise they could be described as elegant. She didn't look at him. Her gaze dropped back to her pages, as if she were dismissing a trivial interruption. She brought the candy to her lips. Vic's heart leaped. Success. Then, in the instant before the sweet touched her mouth, her hand made an almost imperceptible flick. The golden toffee arced neatly through the air and landed perfectly in Vic's open mouth. His smile froze. The sweet exploded against his tongue with a sickly, overpowering sweetness, and then his tongue began to swell as if someone were inflating a balloon. It filled his mouth, pushing his teeth apart until a pink, chubby tip squirmed out through his lips. Wha? Woolululu. He clawed at his mouth, panic muffled into an absurd, gurgling noise. Wednesday looked up from her book at last. A tiny, perfectly cruel smile tugged one corner of her mouth. Her voice was cool and faintly concerned. It seems, she said, tilting her head to measure the spectacle, the effect is quite significant. Vic tried to scold, to accuse, his words reduced to pathetic, indignant gurgles as his balloon tongue made speech impossible. Heat crept up his face from humiliation as much as from the swelling. Wednesday snapped the book closed, rose, and passed him with the grace of someone shedding an annoyance. As she walked by, she left him with a final, cutting piece of advice that landed dead center in his buzzing ears. The first rule of pranking, Victor Black: never show off your loophole-ridden tricks in front of your judge. She vanished behind a row of pillars, leaving Vic to stand, mouth stuffed with a ridiculous, swollen tongue, taking the brunt of a courtyard's laughter and stares. The coronation for Nevermore's king of pranks would have to wait. The crown, it seemed, would not fit him today. 172. Chocolate Trap. Although the Weasley twins had kindly included some antidotes with the prank items when they delivered the batch, Vic only glanced at the tiny, suspiciously colored bottles with scrawled labels before sweeping them decisively into the deepest part of his drawer. After only 2 months of hanging around the twins, he had already learned the true nature of their fun-seeking. If he were the one preparing an antidote, the very idea of not adding a little surprise Easter egg would be an affront to the art of pranking. By the same logic, Fred and George's antidotes were probably even more memorable than the original products. So Vic had no choice but to endure half an hour with a bloated, uncontrollable tongue, looking like a dejected mastiff, until the effects of the Ton-Tong toffee finally wore off. When his tongue returned to its place and his mouth relaxed, he was nearly moved to tears of joy. He moved his aching jaw and savored the long-lost pleasure of pronouncing words clearly. Wednesday. He whispered the name syllable by syllable, each one sharp with the ruthless determination of someone who believes he who does not take revenge is no gentleman. But the emotion flickering behind his eyes was not only frustration and wounded pride. There was also an eager thrill at the sight of an ultimate challenge. He felt like a provoked lion cub, ready to exert every ounce of strength to reclaim his dignity. The throne of the king of pranks would be his, Victor Black, and Wednesday Addams was the Everest he would conquer on his path to coronation. He slipped back into the dormitory, brain already whirring, mapping out a perfect prank that would be more precise, more hidden, and utterly impossible to guard against. This time, he would learn his lesson. He could not show any weakness in front of the judge. He rubbed his still aching cheek and prepared to lie back on the bed to continue plotting when something by his pillow caught his eye. A palm-sized package, carefully tied with a silver and black ribbon, lay incongruously among the clutter. He frowned and picked it up. It had some weight to it. Attached was a delicately cut black card, the line on it written in elegant silver ink. From Wednesday to Vic. There was even a sketch of him at the signature, rendered with precise detail. A gift from Wednesday? The vengeful blaze in Vic's eyes a moment before was extinguished, replaced by a dazzling, almost reverent light. All his bold declarations, revenge must be taken, Everest must be conquered, melted away. What did a throne matter when Wednesday herself had given him a gift? He tore into the wrapping with the awed care of a pilgrim. When the package's contents were revealed, he inhaled sharply and froze, eyes wide. It was a vintage-style, luxuriously packaged golden chocolate, stamped on the front, Chocolate Factory 30th Anniversary Commemorative Edition, with a limited edition number on the edge. Chocolate Factory, 30th Anniversary, Golden Ticket Commemorative Edition, super limited. His exclamations grew louder, bordering on incoherent. My God, Merlin's fanciest socks. Am I dreaming? He clutched his chest as joy flooded him, nearly fainting. Just now, I actually thought about pranking the great, kind, generous Wednesday, who shines on me like a goddess of the night. He filled with guilty self-reproach. I'm trash. I deserve to be punished. How could I have had such thoughts? As if to prove his penitence, he was about to tear away the last layer of wrapping and taste the gift from his girlfriend. But his fingertips stalled on the edge. He glanced back at the black card. The handwriting, although imitated diligently, lacked Wednesday's cold sharpness and meticulous precision. It looked like hers, but it wasn't quite right. His expression shifted from bliss to wary intensity, hawk-eyed. He brought the card close, examined it, even rubbed the ink with his thumb. Humph. A self-satisfied smirk curled at his mouth. Something's wrong. 9 times out of 10, this isn't what it seems. The packaging, the wording, the timing, everything suggested a carefully laid trap. The idea that someone would test the great king of pranks with mere chocolate was laughable. Vic shook his head, adopting a knowing air. I've seen far worse storms than this. How could I fall for it? He weighed the chocolate in his hand like one might weigh an enemy's plot. 30 seconds later, a dull thud sounded in the dormitory. The great king of pranks, Comrade Victor Black, lay sprawled on the floor, still clutching the chocolate in his mouth. A small bite was taken from it. It gleamed invitingly. His eyes were closed. He had been knocked out. But instead of a pained expression, his face wore an absurdly blissful grin, as if he'd died and gone to heaven. He was unconscious with a smile. At that moment, a girl with red braids stepped quietly into the center of the dormitory. Agnes, Wednesday's fanatic, her devoted and obsessive only fan. She stared down at Vic, sprawled and grinning like a lovesick child, rolled her eyes in disgust, and spat. Idiot! You knew there was something off, and you still ate it. Greedy fool! Why would Senior Wednesday like something like this? Her tone mixed incomprehension, jealousy, and a kind of resentment at something she could not claim. The emotion quickly curdled into something hotter and more possessive. Agnes pulled a pair of heavy metal chains from her bag. They glinted coldly. Her mouth curved into an almost sickly, possessive smile. Only I understand Senior Wednesday best, and I alone can appreciate her beauty and strength, she muttered as she crouched, preparing to bind Vic tightly. Her eyes shone with fanatic conviction. I am the one most qualified to stand by her side. She failed to notice, hidden in the dim corners behind her, on the walls and in the gaps of the furniture, pairs of crimson, unreadable eyes lighting up one after another, silent, dense, and fixed on her. 173. Agnes's inner monologue. Agnes envied Wednesday, down to her bones. She envied Wednesday's natural calm and confidence, the way she seemed to stand apart from the world. Wherever she went, she drew every eye, even when she said nothing. More than anything, Agnes envied Wednesday's heart. The way she ignored everyone else's opinions and answered only to her own rules. Especially that day in the square, a memory burned so bright it never faded, when Wednesday, wrapped in that black and purple symbiote suit like a living shadow, took a rapier and with a posture both elegant and cruel, slid the tip straight through Creston's heart. The image was a hot brand on Agnes's soul. It was power and beauty fused into one, the version of herself she wanted to become. No longer invisible, no longer ignored, someone awe-inspiring and unavoidable. She had tried, awkwardly and often pathetically, to step closer to that light. She wanted Wednesday to notice her, even with a single scrutinizing glance. She wanted to be near Wednesday, to be touched by even a sliver of that power so her own miserable life might have meaning. And Victor Black, his very existence was a stain on that perfect image. That two-timing 11. Having the lively little wolf girl wasn't enough, so why was he allowed to be close to Wednesday? Playing the victim to get the right to sleep in the same bed, how could that happen? Agnes had spent God knew how long secretly loosening the screws on Vic's bed frame. How had that ended up benefiting that 11 instead? How could such an eyesore exist in the world? Only I understand you best, Senior Wednesday, she murmured, voice trembling with excitement. The cold of the chains she held made her pulse quicken. I'll show you who really deserves to stand by your side. She had a plan, clear and mad. Stage a kidnapping centered on Vic, a tailor-made puzzle game just for Wednesday. She would leave clues, riddles, and traps that only Wednesday's mind could untangle. With Wednesday's cleverness, she would follow the trail Agnes laid out and arrive at the place Agnes had prepared. There, Wednesday would see two scenes at once. A demonstration of Agnes's control over the whole situation, and Victor Black, that bumbling fool, trapped and making a complete laughingstock of himself. This kidnapping would be proof of Agnes's worth and proof of Vic's shallowness. She wanted Wednesday to see, with her own eyes, who merited a glance. The thought twisted Agnes's mouth into a sick, satisfied smile. She tightened the chains, ready to bind Vic and start setting the stage. Then, the moment the chain was about to lock, click! A faint snap, like a dry twig breaking, came from a shadowed corner. Agnes whirled, eyes darting toward the dormitory's dark recesses. Only the shifting shadows of the walls and the clouds passing beyond the window met her gaze. Had she imagined it? She held her breath and listened. Aside from her own hammering heart and the distant, dying clamor of outreach day in the courtyard, there was only silence. She told herself it was nerves, relaxed slightly, and turned back to the unconscious Victor Black. But the instant her gaze landed on Vic, a cold shudder crawled up her spine, fast and venomous. Her blood seemed to freeze. Numbness spread through her limbs. Where, a moment ago, there had been nothing, a row of figures now stood silently, as if they had grown from the floor itself. They were not human. Agnes could be 100% sure. They wore tight black ninja suits and masks that revealed only their eyes, but their exposed skin had an unnatural gray-blue cast, like something preserved too long. Worse were their eyes, burning embers, pure cold crimson with no whites, no hint of human feeling. They stood in perfect unison, motionless, their gaze boring into her. Her throat worked. She stumbled backward. Her back hit something cold and hard that was not a wall or a piece of furniture. Her hair rose on end. Slowly, stiffly, she turned to see what she'd backed into. Behind her, another line of two had risen without a sound. Identical, statue still, cutting off every route of escape. Surrounded. Agnes's heart hammered as if it would burst. She scanned the room desperately. Left, right, the window, the wardrobe cracks. Figures hung upside down from the ceiling's shadows waited in the gaps. The entire dormitory had become an airtight cage. It was over. Her mind went blank. With their numbers and the unnatural way they materialized, how could she possibly resist? Even her best for talent would mean nothing under that all-seeing gaze. In the recesses of shadow, more pairs of crimson eyes winked like predators lying in wait. There was nowhere to run. Panic cut through her. Instinct took over, and she activated her talent. For a heartbeat, she blurred, became air, and vanished from sight, now invisible. She curled into a corner she hoped would be safe and held her breath, praying the monsters would be fooled. It changed nothing. Something suffocating filled her chest. Every single one of the 7 in front of her, behind her, suspended from the rafters, kept their countless crimson eyes fixed on the exact spot where she had vanished. They didn't move, they didn't make a sound, and they didn't need to search. That absolute, unnerving stillness said everything. They saw through her. Her feeble form was nothing but a transparent joke. Time lengthened, each second an eternity in the oppressive hush. The terror of being watched by so many inhuman eyes crushed whatever courage she had left. Her hands shook so badly she could no longer hold the cold metal chains meant for Vic. They slipped from her limp, invisible fingers and clattered to the floor, the crisp sound stabbing through the silence. Click. 174. Wake up password. Just as Agnes felt the pressure pressing down on her nerves about to crush them completely, tap, tap, tap. Clear, steady footsteps approached the dormitory door, neither hurried nor slow, with a distinct rhythm. They stopped at the door. The heavy wooden slab creaked open. Wednesday stood in the doorway, her pitch-black eyes sweeping the dormitory. The room was full of the Ghost Shadow Legion, statuesque and silent, occupying nearly every shadowed corner. Their crimson eyes were an unsettling constellation in the gloom. Wednesday's brow tightened almost imperceptibly. Where was Vic? What had he gotten himself into this time, summoning so many ghost soldiers? Did he think this dormitory was a training hall? Wednesday, why aren't you coming in? Enid, fresh from dance practice and still dotted with sweat, leaned forward when she saw Wednesday hesitate. She poked her head inside and her eyes went wide. Oh my God! What's happening? Is this Vic's new prank for prank day? This is massive. Her sharp gaze caught a detail and she pointed, half annoyed, at the ghost soldier nearest the door. Hey, you over there! You're stepping on my bunny plushie. The summoned soldier lowered its masked head slightly and with those crimson eyes glanced at its feet. It was indeed stepping on the plushie's ear. With stiff, silent motions, it shifted its weight. Move. Wednesday's voice was cold, soft but authoritative. It carried in the stillness like a blade. Like Moses parting the sea, the ordered movement made the once impenetrable formation part. In perfect unison, the ghost soldiers swept aside, clearing a path from the door to the center of the room. Only then did Wednesday and Enid see what lay in the place they'd been blind to. Vic was splayed on the floor, arms and legs spread, a half-bitten piece of chocolate still clutched in his mouth. His face wore an absurdly contented grin. He was deeply unconscious. Nearby, a length of cold, glinting chain lay discarded. Vic! Enid cried and lunged forward, but Wednesday stepped ahead and gently stopped her. Her gaze did not linger on Vic's ridiculous stupor. It fixed instead on the space beside the scattered chains, a space that seemed empty but was being stared down by every crimson gaze in the room. A faint perfume lingered in the air, one that was certainly not Wednesday's or Enid's. A tiny, bone-chilling smile curved the corner of Wednesday's mouth. She knew. Some clever little mouse had thought she could be invisible and rummage through her territory. Enid. Her tone was calm, unreadable, but it made the air around them feel colder. Check on Vic. He appears to have eaten something unclean. Enid worried for Vic, but noticing the peculiar edge in Wednesday's voice, nodded and hurried to the unconscious boy, checking him over carefully. Wednesday moved slowly toward the spot the ghost soldiers were watching. Her footsteps clicked crisply, tap, tap, each step striking at Agnes's taut nerves. She stopped just a step from the empty space and tilted her head as if inspecting an invisible artwork. I suppose, she spoke gently, though every word carried the weight of a gravestone, you should know that entering someone else's dormitory without permission and attempting to kidnap, or should I say, dispose of, another person's property is a violation of school rules and would be a crime under human law. Agnes, invisible, trembled until she nearly collapsed. She had been heard. Not only had Wednesday found her, but she also knew what had been done. Wednesday continued in the same flat tone one might use to describe the weather, but her gaze was surgical. Beyond rules and law, there's another principle. She paused, and her voice turned like a Siberian wind. Who gave you permission to touch my things with your filthy hands? Those words were final judgment. Agnes's invisibility failed. She reappeared, stumbling as if from a great shock. Her face went paper white, her body shaking like a leaf. She stared at Wednesday, who stood close and unyielding, with outright terror. Wednesday raised an eyebrow. A faint, absurd flicker crossed her pale face. My obsessive little stalker. There was no amusement or anger in her voice. Is a 13-year-old invisible? Child. Agnes forced herself upright, despite weak knees. She could not appear pathetic before her idol. Drawing a breath to steady herself, she put on a show of pride and lifted her skirt in a curtsy. My name is Agnes DeMille, your #1 superfan. Her eyes shone with fanatic devotion. I just wanted to do the most twisted, unique thing to get your attention. Only a special method is worthy of a special person like you. A game? Wednesday's gaze chilled further. The air around them seemed to crystallize. Your game was to knock my boyfriend to the floor and prepare to kidnap him with chains? Victor Black? Agnes's voice snapped with disdain as she pointed at the unconscious Vic. That! Him! He doesn't deserve to be with you at all. Look at that stupid face. He clearly knew something was wrong with that chocolate, and he still bit it. Gluttonous, thoughtless, unable to resist temptation. He's a hopeless idiot. Wednesday's eyes flicked over Vic's blissed-out face. The corner of her mouth twitched barely perceptibly before her stare cut back to Agnes, cold enough to freeze. You should be grateful. Her voice dropped, heavy with warning. This idiot you call worthless did not, before passing out, give his Ghost Shadow Legion a clear threat command. She took a small step forward. She wasn't much taller than Agnes, but her presence was mountainous. If he had, you would already be fragments swallowed by shadow, with not a scrap left. Color drained from Agnes's face. She glanced at the ghost soldiers, standing silent as statues, their crimson eyes fixed on her, and a chill shot up her spine. Wednesday turned her attention back to Enid, who had crouched at Vic's side, worry written on her face. How is he? Enid peeled open Vic's mouth, sniffed the bitten chocolate, and relaxed slightly. It looks like a strong sedative mixed with some kind of hallucinogen. The dose is heavy, but it's not life-threatening. He's just sleeping very deeply. She prodded Vic's rosy cheek helplessly. I have a way to make this idio. Agnes pressed her lips together, hesitated, then babbled to Wednesday in a flurry. I can make Mr. Black wake up with just one sentence. Wednesday said nothing, only tilted her chin to indicate Agnes should proceed. Agnes inhaled like an actor preparing for the final cue, gathering all the drama she could. She faced the unconscious Vic and shouted at the top of her lungs, every word ringing out clear and proud. Wednesday and Enid are here in super sexy pajamas with limited edition chocolates. For a heartbeat, the air froze. Enid choked on her own saliva, cheeks flaming, eyes wide with mortification and shocked disbelief. Wednesday, silent, black-eyed, looked as if the concept of speechlessness had taken physical form in her face. Her gaze, however, slid down to the prone figure on the floor. A miracle happened. 175, the Battle of Watson. The moment those words were spoken, ah! Vic, still unconscious on the ground, let out a muffled groan. His trademark lashes, always an unruly curl, fluttered like a butterfly about to take flight. Under the three girls' varied gazes, he inhaled sharply, like a drowning man finally breaking the surface. His whole body convulsed, and then his eyes flew open. His vision still had a hazy film from the hallucinogen, but his pupils focused fast, locking on Wednesday and Enid. He blinked once, twice, as if making sure he wasn't dreaming. Then a huge, almost ridiculous smile spread across his face, equal parts bliss and absolute contentment, showing two small, sharp canines. Ha! He let out an incoherent giggle, eyes unfocused as he murmured, angels that look like Wednesday and Enid. This must be heaven. Gradually, his head cleared. His gaze flicked between Wednesday's impassive face and Enid's flushed cheeks, then down to their clothes and finally to their empty hands. The smile vanished. In its place was a wounded, almost plaintive expression, his voice cracking with complaint. Wah, liars! Where are the pajamas? Where's the limited edition chocolate? Enid watched his mood flip from rapture to devastation faster than the pages of a book. Half annoyed, half amused, she stepped forward and poked his forehead. Wake up! What kind of pretty dream were you having? Pajamas and chocolate? Agnes knocked you out. We were almost ready to put you in a coffin. Agnes? Vic rubbed the spot she'd poked and turned his head. Only then did he see the red-haired girl nearby, pale, defiant. His memory returned piece by piece, the deadly chocolate, then blackness. Oh, right? He touched his numb tongue as realization dawned. His eyes widened, and his temper shot through the roof. So it was you, you short little. How dare you use chocolate to ambush me? Do you know what that means to a chocolate lover? That's sacrilege. He tried to scramble up to confront Agnes, but his legs still shook, and he stumbled. Wednesday reached out with a cold, unobtrusive hand and steadied his arm. Her touch was almost invisible, but Vic straightened in an instant, revived. Humph! He puffed out his chest and, pointing at Agnes, announced to Wednesday and Enid with a mix of bravado and lingering fear. See that? My love for you two is strong. I even resisted the temptation of heaven. This is called The power of love. Wednesday gave him a flat, emotionless look. Your way of resisting temptation is to pass out with a stupid grin and then cry because you didn't get pajamas. I was crying tears of joy. It was a natural expression of emotion. Seeing Vic argue so energetically finally put Enid at ease. She sighed and patted her chest, until her and Wednesday's gazes both iced over and fixed on Agnes, who had been trying to edge toward the door. Internal crisis resolved, now for the external one. Agnes froze under those three stares, which felt sharper than the crimson eyes of the seven. She knew her little plan had blown up spectacularly. The real judgment had only just begun. So, Vic's voice dropped, heavy as an approaching storm. The perverted stalker who threw Wednesday's manuscript into the bonfire and almost got her hurt was you? Agnes momentarily stiffened at Vic's sudden intensity, but she immediately raised her chin and sniffed, pride backed by pathological boldness. That was just an appetizer. Besides, how could I ever truly put Senior Wednesday in danger? A triumphant smirk spread over her face, as though she were proud of her meticulous planning. I had a Da Vinci watching Senior Wednesday's location at all times. If there had been real danger, telekinesis could have saved her immediately. She paused, striking a sanctimonious tone. As for the novel, I made a backup ages ago. It's foolproof. I value Senior Wednesday's work more than anyone. Vic almost laughed in anger at that twisted logic. Agnes's reasoning was warped from bottom to top. Then her tone shifted. Her eyes lit with fanatic obsession as she turned to Wednesday, voice rising. Senior Wednesday, do you see? Compared to that idiot knocked out by a single piece of chocolate, that dead weight who does more harm than help. She jabbed a finger at Vic, disdain thick in her expression. I, Agnes DeMille, am the one fit to stand by your side as your assistant. I understand you better. I am more worthy of you. Vic's head swam. It finally clicked. This wasn't a prank or petty revenge. It was an attempt to usurp him. She wanted his place beside Wednesday. Anger and territorial panic flooded Vic. He barreled to Wednesday's side, awkwardly putting himself between her and Agnes, though she clearly didn't need protecting. Pointing at his own chest, he declared, instinct and pride overriding decorum. Steal my spot? In your dreams. Listen, Shorty, Holmes can only have one Watson, and that's me, Victor Black. Got it? Agnes snorted, a look of utter contempt on her face. A Watson who gets knocked out by chocolate? Unheard of. Perhaps the great Senior Holmes needs a more reliable assistant, someone who won't hold her back. You, Vic choked, cheeks burning. The chocolate incident was a stain on his reputation, and being so effectively undermined made him both humiliated and furious. The two flared at each other, sparks flying. An argument was about to erupt. 176. Agnes's three questions. Enough. Wednesday's voice wasn't loud, but it landed like a block of ice dropped into a boiling pot, instantly cooling the tension. Her gaze went straight to Agnes. Her eyes, black as pitch, gave away no emotion, but her words were surgical. You seem to know Vic very well. She paused, then added in a flat tone, someone who doesn't know him wouldn't be able to make him excited with just one sentence. The word landed with deliberate subtlety, hinting at both arousal and the source of Vic's embarrassing reaction. A sudden flush colored Agnes's pale cheeks, her eyes lit with an eager heat, as if this slip had validated something about her. She hurried to defend herself, voice sharpening with a paranoid edge. No, Wednesday. My knowledge of that is just incidental. The one I know best is you. In Nevermore, no one knows you better than I do. Not even that. She jabbed a finger at Vic as if marking him for disposal. Oh, please. Something in Vic finally snapped with a noisy twang, the last string of his patience breaking. This clingy little redhead was taking it too far, trying to steal his girl in front of him and trampling him underfoot. He couldn't stand it. Bullshit! He slapped his thigh hard, his voice booming. Fury burned behind his eyes as he stepped forward, nearly crowding Agnes. I'm the one who knows Wednesday better. To have someone question his understanding of his girlfriend, especially while trying to poach her, was humiliation. Agnes didn't flinch. She lifted her chin, provocation plain in her tone. Oh, really? Are you challenging me? Vic narrowed his eyes and ground out the words through his teeth at the arrogant redhead. And what if I am? Agnes shot back coolly. Sigh, here we go again. Enid covered her face and let out a helpless sigh, amused and exasperated by the familiar childish squabble over Wednesday. Vic breathed deeply, forcing down the urge to fling the redhead out the nearest window. A competition, then? Fine. He'd prove who the real boyfriend was. We'll do questions, 3 each. Sound fair? Agnes's chin tilted with the smugness of someone on home turf. Why do you get to go first? Vic bristled, feeling the initiative snatched away. Ladies first. Agnes used the old rule like a trump card and smirked. Fine, let's begin. Vic curled a lip, but inside he was brimming with confidence. He and Wednesday shared a bed. Sometimes Enid was between them, but that still counted. Who could know Wednesday better than him? Agnes cleared her throat for her first question. First question, what time does Miss Wednesday wake up every morning? Obviously, Vic began, then stopped. What time was it? His mind raced, gears squealing. He remembered Wednesday or Enid usually rose before him. He was the one who lingered in bed, needing a nudge. But the exact time? He had no idea. Pass. Next. His face went pale and then hot with embarrassment. He'd started on the wrong foot and lost face. Agnes's smile widened with barely concealed triumph. Her look said plainly, "Is that it?" And Vic's teeth ached with irritation. Second question, Agnes pressed, riding the momentum. What's Miss Wednesday's favorite thing to eat for breakfast? Vic froze again. He tried to piece it together. When he finally hauled himself out of bed, Wednesday and Enid always seemed to have eaten already. His breakfasts were often brought to the classroom by Wednesday or left at his bedside by Enid. The thought that he was being pampered by his 2 girlfriends in turns made him feel useless and flustered. He faltered. Agnes's mocking tone delivered the finishing blow. It seems Mr. Black isn't even clear on Mrs. Basic daily routine. Less talk, one more question. Vic straightened, trying to salvage dignity. Besides, I doubt you even know the answer. Oh. Agnes's mouth curved into a slow smile. Unhurriedly, she pulled a palm-sized leather notebook from a pocket at her skirt. She flipped to a page and read off details in a crisp, rapid cadence. Miss Wednesday Addams, daily baseline schedule and breakfast preferences. Wakes at 5:47 a.m., lies still for 3 minutes, rises at 5:50 a.m., drinks a glass of water maintained at 45 degrees Celsius, begins breakfast at exactly 6 a.m., main course, a slice of whole wheat toast spread with approximately 1.5 millimeters of dark honey from a specific apiary in southern France, accompanied by black coffee at 65 degrees. Typical dining time, 12 minutes. Her delivery was steady and frighteningly precise, like a readout from a clinical observation. Vic's expression emptied, his mouth hung open as if struck. This wasn't just knowing someone, this was obsessive surveillance. A chill crept up his spine. What do you do all day? Why are you always tailing my girlfriend? Agnes only got smugger at his stunned silence. Sensing victory, she launched her supposed coup de grace. Final question, what are Miss Wednesday's measurements? Agnes imagined the champagne pop of triumph. This idiot, with only smut on his mind, could never know such intimate details. But the blank on Vic's face melted into a strange, triumphant grin. He might not have known the exact numbers, but he had his own advantage, his uncanny visual modeling ability. In a blink, his eyes scanned, shoulder line, rib cage, waist, hip curve, like a mental 3D scanner. Then he rattled off a string of figures with unnerving confidence. Bust XX, waist YY, hips ZZ. The accuracy was so immediate that Enid instinctively covered her chest as if she had been measured. Wednesday's placid face stiffened. She had felt Vic's eyes sweep over her as if they were hands, and hearing the precise numbers spoken aloud in public brought a faint blush to her ears. Through clenched teeth, she spat. Pervert. You're an abstract pervert. Agnes hissed, furious. She'd compiled every detail, only to be outmatched by this bizarre talent. Vic's grin spread. He couldn't help showing off. By the way, Enid's measurements are... A giant stuffed rabbit sailed through the air and smacked him square in the head. Enid had thrown it with perfect aim. His sentence died on his lips. Enough! Next round already! Enid shouted, cheeks blazing with shame and indignation. Don't get cocky, you just got lucky on that one. Agnes swallowed a flush of regret. If she'd known, she would have asked something like which book was Wednesday's favorite. Still, she folded her notebook closed with a look that promised more trouble to come. 177, Vic's 3 questions. Now it's my turn. A mischievous glint flashed in Vic's eyes. He stole a glance at the expressionless Wednesday beside him, silently hoping he wouldn't pay for this later. "First question," he announced with a grin that smelled of triumph. "What does Wednesday's kiss taste like?" Wednesday closed her eyes slowly, her long lashes casting pale shadows across her cheeks. She'd known, from the moment Vic glanced at her, that he wouldn't ask anything serious. Agnes's mouth flew open, her eyes bulged, and her face flushed red with fury. How could he possibly know? She hadn't kissed her. Wednesday hadn't kissed anyone. "You shameless wretch," Agnes screeched. The idea that this cad had kissed Wednesday filled her with a hot, indignant grief, as if a priceless relic had been sullied. You're outrageous," Vic puffed up with pride, ready to show off. "Heh, it's the faint, cool scent of books mixed with roses, and it's a bit like—" "Enough, shut up! Next question." Agnes clapped her hands over her ears and shook her head so violently it was almost comical. She wanted desperately to know the answer, but she refused to hear it from the very person she saw as Wednesday's defiler. Wednesday's eyes were still closed, but the corner of her mouth twitched. She decided for the moment to ignore the childish contest. "Second question." Vic pressed his advantage. "When it's cold, which side does Wednesday usually sleep on?" Agnes shot up in confidence. She had watched Wednesday nap before. Someone as meticulous as Senior Wednesday definitely lies flat, hands crossed over her chest, maintains a standard. "Wrong," Vic said, delighting in the look of defeat. "She likes to sleep on her right side. Because the right side is against me. She says my body is like a furnace and it's warm to curl up against when it's freezing." He beamed, drenched in that intimacy of "only I know this." Enid, nearby, burst out laughing. A sharp look from Wednesday made her stifle it, but her shoulders still shook. Agnes's face went even redder. Her fingers dug into the edge of her notebook until her knuckles whitened. "Third question." Vic's voice carried the glee of the triumphant. He let a perfectly timed, guilty-looking blush creep into his face. "What did Wednesday say to me when we were under the same quilt yesterday?" It was like dropping a boulder into a pond. Ripples crashed through the room. Agnes went pale, her brain shorted out. Not just in the same room, not just the same bed, under the same quilt? How had things escalated so fast? A bitter, ridiculous knot rose in her throat, especially when she remembered how she'd loosened the screws on Vic's bed as a supposed prank, an assist that had, quite literally, led to him getting into a shared quilt with Wednesday. The irony stung. Enid's eyes went wide with horror. "Sister, how could you go behind my back and be under the same quilt with Vic?" Wednesday's mouth barely moved. The air around her seemed to chill. Her dark eyes, unreadable and cold, snapped to Vic, who was still trying to look bashful. Did he have to use such an ambiguous phrase that begged for maximum speculation? And what was that counterfeit blush doing on his face? The killing intent in Wednesday's stare made Vic drop his flirtatious expression and replace it with a sheepish grin. "Ha, the answer is." He cleared his throat in a clipped, perfectly flat imitation of Wednesday's voice, repeated her words verbatim. "Vic, if you dare enter my quilt again, I will neuter you." "Phew." Enid sighed with relief so loudly the tension in the room snapped. "Thank goodness," I thought. Her face brightened, almost smug. The consequences of sneaking into Wednesday's quilt, it seemed, were severe. Agnes stared at Vic, incredulous. Her expression twisted. "That's it? You risk being neutered just to boast about getting a death threat?" Vic, however, fed off her incredulity. The blush vanished and arrogance flared. He tilted his chin and crowed, "What's with that face? I can get into Wednesday's quilt, even if it means getting a death threat. Can you?" "Loser." He strutted like a peacock. Agnes shook with rage, pointing at him, but she had no ready argument against his shameless logic. Even threatened, he had been close enough to be threatened. "This contest is meaningless. This shows no real understanding. It doesn't count. You're cheating," she spat. "Why wouldn't it count?" Vic put his hands on his hips, self-righteous. "This is advanced emotional cognition. Can't you tell, kid?" Agnes bit her lip, tears welling. Furious and humiliated, she trembled. At that moment, a cool voice cut in like a judge's gavel. "Game over." Wednesday had opened her eyes. Her gaze swept over Agnes, then fixed on Vic. "Victor Black wins." Her tone held no warmth, just blunt fact. Vic whooped like a boy with a new trophy and nearly lunged to hug her, then stopped cold at the murderous look she shot him and instead pumped his fist in the air. Wednesday turned back to Agnes. "As for you, Agnes DeMille." "Wait," Agnes cried. In a flash, she produced a small metallic object from a hidden pocket in her dress and held it up. Under the dim light, it glinted plainly, and a slight, hopeful smile curved her lips as she looked at Wednesday. "Senior Wednesday," she said, voice shaking but clear, "if I use this item as a bargaining chip, could I earn the right to stay at your side, as an assistant, even if only in name?" Vic's pupils shrank the instant he saw what she held. He put a hand to his own pocket, empty. "No, that's 178, training plan." Vic watched helplessly as that small pen, his countless hopes for future happiness, was handed to Wednesday by Agnes. It felt like an icy hand was squeezing his heart, his mouth puckered, and real moisture instantly clouded his eyes, making him on the verge of performing a pathetic tough guy cry right there. His pen, his ultimate strategic prop for legitimately asking Wednesday for kisses, demanding hugs, and even trading for more benefits. Just like that, it was gone. That red-haired, yandere little brat, whose backside definitely deserved a severe thrashing. When did she swipe it? He hadn't noticed a single thing. Vic almost lunged to grab it back, but it was too late. Wednesday's pale, slender fingers had already closed around the metal body of the pen. The moment Agnes handed it over, she even turned her head to throw a pointed wink in Vic's direction. Not an act of charm, but an outright taunt, radiating the triumphant air of a victor, saying, "See, I won." Vic ground his back molars so hard it felt like they might crack. "You brat who deserves 800 spankings. Just you wait." Agnes pretended not to hear, her full attention fixed on Wednesday. When Wednesday accepted the pen without protest, she was ecstatic. It worked. Wednesday toyed with the pen for a moment, her gaze lingering on it as if appraising an interesting piece of loot. She seemed completely oblivious to Vic's pitiful look beside her, which was practically shouting, "Please give it back. It's my lifeblood." She slid the pen smoothly into the pocket of her black dress, the motion natural and unhesitating. Then she lifted her lashes. Her pitch-black eyes regarded the breathlessly expectant Agnes coolly as she delivered her verdict in a calm voice. "Well done." The praise sounded more like an objective evaluation of a tool completing its task. "From now on, you are my attendant." Those words sounded like final absolution and a coronation, heavenly music to Agnes's ears. Her pale cheeks flushed with excitement. She could barely contain the victorious smile at the corners of her mouth. She straightened as if receiving a medal and answered, voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, Senior Wednesday, I will not let you down." Her gaze burned as if it could scorch a hole through Wednesday. But to Vic, Wednesday's words were a bolt from the blue. The sky was falling. Not only had he permanently lost his UR grade, powerfully functional strategic prop, he also had to watch helplessly as the little brat who'd gone out of her way to steal his girl by underhanded means was officially admitted into Wednesday's inner circle as an attendant who could rightfully stay by her side. He'd lost the wife and the soldiers. He had lost everything. Vic felt his vision go dark. The world drained of color as grief and indignation warred inside him, leaving only a single line of thought flashing frantically through his mind. Why is my life so bitter? Vic slumped to the ground, staring blankly toward the pocket where Wednesday had stashed the pen, as if watching his life savings go up in smoke. That pen wasn't just a prop. It was the blueprint for his future happy life, the VIP pass to Wednesday's special rewards. "My pen, my kisses, my hugs," he murmured like a big dog whose last bite of kibble had been stolen, radiating visible defeat. Agnes, meanwhile, was basking in euphoria. She tried to keep a straight face, adopting the proper professional expression an assistant should have, but her terrifyingly bright eyes and slightly upturned chin betrayed her inner triumph. She even sneaked a provocative eyebrow raise in Vic's direction. "Humph, kid, see that? This is true power." Feeling the moment wasn't quite hot enough, she suddenly remembered something and pulled a stack of neatly bound papers, faintly scented, from another hidden pocket in her dress. She respectfully handed them to Wednesday. "By the way, Senior Wednesday," she said, her voice threaded with subtle boasting and just a touch of regret. "This is the Vic kidnapping case file I originally planned for you. I wanted to give you a perfect mystery-solving experience, but unfortunately, she shot a sharp glare at Vic, her tone full of resentment. It was ruined in advance by a certain person who has no sense of romance. Wednesday raised an eyebrow. Interest piqued. She took the thick stack of papers, her pale fingers flipping through them as her dark eyes skimmed the contents. Play dead. I see. It's not English, but musical notes. She read one of the puzzle designs softly, the corner of her mouth twitching almost imperceptibly. And this, an absent bibliography pointing to H.G. Wells' The Invisible Man, both the answer and a hint about the kidnapper's ability. A double entendre. Not bad. There was a rare note of appreciative surprise in her tone. Agnes had talent for design and detail. If the game had been executed successfully, its ingenuity and dark aesthetics might well have met Wednesday's exacting standards. The mechanical parts in the case file, Wednesday mused. Seeing Wednesday satisfied, Agnes struck while the iron was hot, pride rolling off her like armor. I had a Da Vinci help me make them. I have some inconvenient dirt on him. You know, having leverage helps. Wednesday's praise made Agnes tremble with excitement. A sickly flush crept across her pale face. She shot a triumphant look at Vic, eyes saying, "See? I'm the one who can stand on equal intellectual footing with Senior Wednesday." Vic's eyes widened. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. This red-haired brat who deserved a beating had used the plan originally meant to kidnap and torture him to win Wednesday's praise. She even dared to provoke him. This was outrageous. There are some things a man simply cannot endure. If Enid could take it, Victor Black certainly could not. I'll see for myself what kind of amazing game plan could possibly catch Wednesday's eye. He stiffened his neck and leaned forward, determined to inspect the case file. He squeezed in beside Wednesday, craning to peer at the pages. After a few lines, though, he fell silent. He couldn't understand it, not at all. Play dead? How did that relate to musical notes? What did a heart and a pipe organ have to do with each other? And who the hell was this Wells guy? Were his books any good? Was he as handsome as me? Completely failing to grasp the clever puzzle designs and literary metaphors, Vic refused to show weakness. He shoved the question marks back into his skull and plastered on a look of total comprehension like a seasoned expert. Stroking his chin, he nodded frequently and evaluated in a deliberately deep tone. I see. The concept is fairly clever, I suppose, but it's just average. Agnes gave him a massive eye roll and didn't bother to argue. Vic, unwilling to back down, kept looking, scanning an appendix that described the game segments. When he saw a specific item listed, he froze. His finger trembled as he pointed at the section, his voice pitched up. Wait, what? What is this? What the hell is a 12 and an 8? Chilly water? Agnes, what are you trying to do? Agnes glanced over casually, as relaxed as if discussing the weather. It's nothing, just a little prank. It is prank day, isn't it? Besides, doesn't a kid like you need some profound lessons to help you turn over a new leaf? Prank? Lessons? Vic's voice climbed an octave, his eyes blazing with disbelief. The things on this list. What are you trying to do? Train me into some weird thing of yours? His finger shook on the case file. At last, he realized that the darkness and desire for control hidden within this seemingly petite red-haired girl might be far more terrifying than he'd ever imagined. Wednesday, Vic almost leapt across the room, finger trembling as he jabbed at the one piece of incriminating evidence. You absolutely cannot take in this yandere loli. She's not Watson. She's Moriarty. She's a supervillain. Did you see that? She has ulterior motives. She's coveting your handsome boyfriend. The corner of Agnes's mouth curled into a faint, exquisitely mocking smile. She didn't bother looking at Vic. Her eyes remained fixed on Wednesday. Her tone was light, but like Wednesday's, it was as sharp as poisoned needles. Coveting you? Victor Black, you flatter yourself. She paused, as if savoring each word. Aside from your face, which is tolerable, everything else, your intelligence, your taste, your self-control, is as useful as non-recyclable trash. At last she turned her head, taking Vic in with a single disdainful sweep. Her calm, malicious delivery landed the final blow. If Senior Wednesday is the only moon in the night sky, you don't even qualify as a star in orbit. At best, you're an eyesore, a piece of redundant space dust floating outside the system. You Vic's face went red with fury and humiliation. He could barely breathe. He whirled to Wednesday, pleading, voice cracking. "Wednesday, look at her! Say something! She called me trash dust!" Wednesday didn't seem to hear him. Her gaze was buried in the neatly bound proposal Agnes had given her, pages full of punishment and behavioral correction. Her slender fingers tapped a particular entry. For a moment, something almost like appreciation flickered in her black eyes, scarcely noticeable, the way one inspects a precisely engineered instrument of torment. She spoke at last, cool as ever, and Vic's heart dropped. "It does have merits. The logic is sound, and it is operationally feasible." Vic's eyes snapped wide in horror, as if he'd watched his aloof, pure girlfriend be seduced by a demon. "It's over, it's over, it's over." In his head he screamed, "My Wednesday, my pure, slightly violent Wednesday. She's being led astray by this naturally evil, dark-minded brat. She's being enlightened. The gates to a new world are opening." He pictured a terrifying future in which Wednesday wielded a small leather whip and smiled at him. "Vic, be a good boy today, too." "Wednesday, are you really going to take Agnes on as an assistant?" Enid leaned in so close her breath brushed Wednesday's shoulder, voice barely above a whisper, her blue eyes anxious. She pointed subtly at Agnes, who, despite her respectful posture, could not hide the fanatic light in her gaze. "This girl is a little too intense. Even her hairstyle is the same as yours. It's creepy." Wednesday finally raised her eyes, black and indifferent, and answered as if stating an obvious fact. "Why not?" Her fingers tapped a chart titled Negative Reinforcement Stimuli and Behavior Extinction Curves. Having someone else to compete for favor can effectively divert Vic's excessively focused learning. Otherwise, with his alarming ability to mimic and practice, I'm afraid he'll have eaten both of us out of house and home before the semester ends. Her gaze flicked intentionally to Enid, who immediately went crimson. There was a trace of teasing in Wednesday's tone. "Especially you, Enid. By the end of the semester, you might even have a little one bundled in your arms." "I will not," Enid blustered, face as red as a ripe tomato, stamping a foot like a cat whose tail had been trodden on. She said it with bravado, but her heart stuttered at the thought. Images of Vic's grin and his shameless leaning in flashed through her mind. There was a little danger here. To cover her embarrassment, she leaned even closer and, curiosity overcoming discretion, glanced at the proposal in Wednesday's hands. She only meant to skim, but soon she was reading line after line of the behavioral correction plan and the detailed explanation of disciplinary measures. Her eyes widened. She sucked in a sharp breath. The scale, the variety, the refinement of the design, everything in Agnes's proposal was far more stimulating than anything Vic had ever come up with. If Vic's earlier contrivance had opened a shameful, heart-pounding door, Agnes's thin pages had used a battering ram to smash the door and the surrounding walls, and then revealed a bizarre, dangerously seductive new world. Enid turned to look at Agnes again, disbelieving. The girl looked only 13. How could she possess this knowledge? This wasn't mere precocity. It was the mind of a budding criminal profiler. "All right, it's getting late. Miss DeMille, you may go. Be sure to report tomorrow." Wednesday's dismissal was cold and final. Agnes complied with a small, precise curtsy. She fought to keep her expression composed, but a fanatic light danced in her eyes. "Just call me Agnes, Senior Wednesday. I will report on time tomorrow." Her voice was clear, with the tiniest tremor of excitement. She took one last, reverent look at Wednesday as if imprinting the image on her memory, then turned and walked toward the dormitory door with carefully measured composure. Vic, who a moment before had been a picture of mourning, brightened as if doused in sunlight. He straightened, hands on hips, chin lifted. His eyes shone with unhidden, almost childlike smugness as he watched Agnes's retreating back. Assistant? A fancy title. When it came down to it, she would still have to be beaten. After dark, the one who could stay in the dorm and share Wednesday's bed would still be him, Victor Black. Agnes was a mere defeated rival. He almost hummed a victory tune under his breath. Agnes felt the gaze on her like a physical thing, brimming with triumph and provocation. She didn't need to turn to picture Vic's smug face. Heat flared in her chest. Jealousy, resentment, a sharp, aching hatred, not just of Vic, that idiot, but of herself for having messed with his bed in the first place. She'd practically handed a pillow to the enemy, and pushed Senior Wednesday into his arms. Just as her fingers closed on the doorknob, a sudden thought lit through her like lightning. She paused. Her eyes darted cunningly. A brilliant idea had come to her. She turned back, trying on an expression of innocence so soft it could pass for timidity. Her large eyes blinked at Wednesday. Her voice was small and almost pleading. "Senior Wednesday, there's one more thing." Vic, already halfway up onto the bed, froze. He pricked up his ears, instantly alert. Wednesday lifted her eyes and sent a single, silent question. 180. The battle for beds. It's about Senior Vic. Agnes said softly, her voice so syrupy it felt like it could pull threads of silk. Hearing that one sentence made Vic's heart drop. Alarm bells went off in his head. A moment ago she was calling him names, and now she was using Senior? When things flipped that fast, there had to be a catch. This schemer was definitely up to something. "I noticed Senior Vic doesn't seem to have a bed to sleep in," Agnes continued. Her pale face arranged in exaggerated concern, her eyes glinting as if she were making a great sacrifice. I can bring my bed over for him to sleep in. I don't mind. I'll just sleep on the floor." She looked up at Wednesday with the worried, abandoned expression of a stray animal, but inside she was calculating rapidly. Of course, it wasn't really her bed she intended to give. She planned to requisition Wednesday's bed for Vic. If Wednesday refused, then Agnes would expose whatever secrets she could find. Even if she had to sleep on the floor to pull this off, she couldn't let Vic have any excuse to be anywhere near Wednesday's bed. Vic's hair nearly stood on end. Holy crap. Not only was she a troublemaker, she was a high-level schemer. On the surface, she framed it as concern for his sleep, but it was obvious. She wanted to lock down the bed and cut off any chance he might have to get close to Wednesday. He felt like she was digging up his roots and cutting off his path to heaven. "Hey, cut it out with the fake kindness," Vic barked, abandoning any pretense in front of Wednesday and pointing at Agnes's nose. "I sleep perfectly fine. I don't need your meddling. Keep that little bed of yours to roll around in." He'd fought tooth and nail, using thick-skinned persistence to claim a spot on the shared bed, and this red-haired brat wanted to send him back to floor sleeping with one sentence? Not on his watch. Senior Vic. Agnes summoned tears on cue, the sort that threatened to fall but never did, and Vic felt his stomach flip. "How could you think that of me? I just didn't want to see you resting poorly at night." Senior Wednesday would be worried too. She skillfully dragged Wednesday into it to claim the moral high ground. Vic was so angry he could barely breathe. This was manipulation on a whole other level. He turned to Wednesday and pleaded, "Wednesday, don't listen to her nonsense. My sleep is great. Floor? No way." But Wednesday ignored his frantic defense and looked at Agnes with that cool, emotionless gaze she always had. "My boyfriend's sleep issues are probably not something you need to worry about," she said flatly. Agnes's face fell. She thought Wednesday found her meddling offensive, and she lowered her lashes, letting out the perfectly timed little sob. Sorry, Senior Wednesday. I just thought." She thought her plan had failed. In truth, Wednesday had her own considerations. On cold nights, having someone like Vic around, someone who regulated his temperature, was more comfortable than sleeping alone. But she would never say that aloud, and she certainly wouldn't let Vic know. He'd strut around for days if he found out. Seeing Wednesday's stance, Agnes sulked and abandoned her bed donation, turning to leave the scene defeated. She gave up, but Vic wasn't going to let it stand. Everyone in Nevermore knew Victor Black settled scores the same day, no delays, and he always collected interest. "Wait," Vic sprang to life, a grin stretching across his face, part fake enthusiasm, part wicked amusement. "Leaving already? It's rude to leave empty-handed. People might think Victor Black has poor manners and neglected his guest." He emphasized guest, and his eyes flashed with fox-like cunning. A villainous chuckle escaped him. He rubbed his hands together and fixed Agnes with a mischievous stare. "Since you're here, why not take some souvenirs before you go? I guarantee they'll leave a deep impression, one you'll never forget." Agnes took a wary step back, her hand reflexively covering her chest, spine pressed to the cold door. She remembered how Vic had ranted when he found those crossbow photos, talk of catching the stalker and spanking them until their butt was swollen. Was he serious? Panic made her cheeks flare bright red. She urgently clutched at her skirt to cover her rear, as if she could already feel the heat. No way, she thought. He couldn't possibly be that perverted, that graceless. Could he? Vic closed the distance with a predatory smile. The excitement of a new toy shone in his eyes. Agnes's heart sank. Considering his history of breaking rules, getting revenge, and having no concept of gentlemanly restraint, it was terrifyingly possible. "Don't come any closer," she stammered, her voice trembling. She pressed herself against the door as if she could melt into it. "If you dare spank me, I'll fight you to the death." She bared her teeth like a small animal cornered, ready to bite. Vic made an exaggerated look of disgust and waved a hand. "Don't worry. I'm afraid it would hurt my hand." Agnes flushed so red it was almost comical. Shame and fury wrestled in her throat, but she was cut off by his precise, stinging mockery. He didn't stop there. With a wicked gleam, he continued. "You were prepared to bring out crossbows, stink bombs, and whatever other gifts to entertain me. As a courtesy, I ought to prepare some proper return gifts to honor your creativity." His tone softened into a fake kindness, and he flashed a disarming smile. "Don't worry. I'm not angry. After all, pranks on prank day are forgivable as long as they don't go too far, right? So," as if on cue, he produced several gaudily packaged snacks from somewhere and spread them in his palm like candy, offering them to Agnes in a light, teasing voice. "Here, take one, and by the same token, you have to forgive me for whatever I do to you later."